The wind cut through the mountain pass with teeth sharper than any blade Astrid Vinter had ever known. Each gust tore at her worn cloak, threatening to rip the basket of herbs from her frozen fingers. She should have turned back an hour ago when the first flakes began to fall, should have listened to the voice in her head that whispered warnings about winter storms and foolish errands. But the fever had already claimed 2 children in the lower village. Without wolfsbane, it would claim more before the week's end. Snow gathered in the creases of her leather boots, melting against skin already numb from cold. The forest around her stood silent, trees bent beneath accumulating ice. No birds sang, no creatures rustled through the underbrush. Everything with sense had found shelter. Everything except her. Astrid pulled the cloak tighter, squinting through the swirling white. The wolfsbane grew near the frozen stream, tucked beneath an overhang of stone where spring water kept the ground from freezing completely. She had found it last winter, marked the location in her mind. The purple-blue flowers would be dormant now, but the roots remained potent, more potent even in the deep cold. Her breath clouded the air in short bursts. 2 more ridges, then the descent to the streambed. The thought of her cabin kept her moving. Warm hearth, dried venison hanging from the rafters, the bed piled high with furs that still smelled faintly of smoke and pine. She had been alone there for 2 years now, ever since the battle that took Tormund and half the men from the village, ever since she stopped being able to bear the pitying looks, the whispered concerns, the widows who tried to fold her into their circle of grief. Better to be alone, better to be useful. The wind shifted and she caught a sound beneath its howl, something high and thin, almost like... Astrid stopped walking, listened. There again. A whimper, barely audible over the storm. Her heart kicked against her ribs. An animal probably caught in the weather, seeking shelter just as desperately as she. The smart thing would be to ignore it, keep moving, collect what she came for, and hurry home before the storm worsened. But the sound came again, weaker this time, fading. Cursing under her breath, Astrid turned toward the noise. Her boots sank deep into fresh powder as she pushed through a stand of snow-laden pines. Branches dumped their burden on her head and shoulders. Ice slid down the back of her neck. The whimpering grew louder, more desperate. She found it in a small clearing, half buried in snow. A wolf pup, golden fur matted with blood and ice. Its rear leg twisted at an unnatural angle, caught in the cruel jaws of an iron trap. The metal teeth had bitten deep, and crimson stained the pristine white in blooming circles. But this was no ordinary trap. Its surface gleamed with strange markings, ancient runes that seemed to pulse with faint silver light. Astrid's stomach clenched. The old stories her father told by firelight flashed through her mind. Tales of the silver-blood hunters, men who sought to eradicate the Veil Walkers, beings who could shift between human and wolf form, creatures of legend, myths to frighten children. Yet here lay evidence of something more. The pup's eyes found hers, pale gold, almost amber, far too aware for an animal that should be mad with pain and fear. It did not snarl or snap, did not try to drag itself away. It simply watched her, those strange eyes holding an intelligence that made her skin prickle with unease. She should leave it. Wolves were dangerous, even young ones. In a few months, this pup would be large enough to bring down a deer. In a year, it could threaten livestock, could threaten her. The pup whimpered again, a sound so pitiful it cracked something in her chest. Astrid dropped to her knees beside it, setting down her basket. The trap was old but well made, designed to hold until the trapper returned. She pulled off her mittens, worked her fingers into the mechanism. The metal was so cold it burned, but she found the release lever and pressed hard. The jaws sprang open with a snap. The pup yelped, tried to scramble away, but its injured leg gave out. It collapsed into the snow, panting, sides heaving. Blood flowed freely now from the wound, bright and hot against the ice. Without thinking, Astrid stripped off her cloak and wrapped the pup in it, bundling the small body against her chest. The wolf weighed more than expected, solid muscle beneath soft fur. It trembled against her but made no move to bite. Those golden eyes watched her face with an intensity that should not exist in any animal. "What are you?" the thought whispered through her mind, but she pushed it away. The wolfsbane would have to wait. This creature would bleed out before she made it to the stream and back. Her cabin was closer. She had supplies there, clean water, thread and needle, herbs to prevent infection. If she hurried, they might both survive this storm. Astrid turned back the way she came. the pup's weight warm against her heart. The wind screamed approval or warning. She could no longer tell which. By the time she reached her cabin, her arms burned with effort and cold. The pup had stopped whimpering, gone limp and quiet in its cocoon of wool. For a terrible moment, she thought it had died, but she felt the flutter of breath against her neck, shallow but steady. She kicked open the door, stumbled inside. The remains of her morning fire glowed faintly in the hearth. She laid the pup on the table, unwrapped it carefully. The wound was worse than she thought. The trap had not just crushed, it had torn. Bone showed white through mangled flesh. Her hands moved with certainty born of 2 years alone. 2 years of being the only person within miles who knew how to clean a wound or set a break. She had learned these skills in a different life, serving as a field medic in battles too numerous to count. Tormund had called her gifts a blessing. The village called it witchcraft. Neither understood it was simply necessity. She built up the fire first, set water to boil. Then she gathered her supplies. Clean linen, needle and gut thread, dried yarrow for the bleeding, comfrey for the bone, honey to prevent festering. But she hesitated over the small box pushed to the back of her shelf, the one containing herbs and remedies most village folk would call dark magic. The silver runes on the trap worried her. If this was truly what she suspected, Astrid opened the box, retrieved a small vial of dark liquid, an ancient remedy her grandmother had called wolf shield, said to counteract silver poisoning. She'd never had cause to use it, never truly believed the stories of men who could become wolves, or of the silver that burned their flesh like fire. Until now. The pup watched her through half-closed eyes, did not struggle when she began to clean the wound, though it must hurt terribly, did not bite when she set the bone, feeling the pieces grind together beneath her fingers. It only made a small, broken sound deep in its throat, and something in that sound reminded her of Tormund in his final moments. When she applied the wolf shield to the wound, the pup's eyes flew open. A shudder ran through its small frame, and the flesh around the wound seemed to sizzle for the briefest moment. Then the bleeding slowed, and the pup relaxed, its breathing evening out. She worked through the night until the wound was cleaned and stitched, the leg splinted with thin strips of willow bark. The pup slept finally, its breathing deep and even. Astrid slumped into her chair by the fire, exhaustion dragging at her bones. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, warmth seeped back into her frozen limbs. The cabin smelled of blood and herbs, smoke and snow. On the table, the golden pup twitched in dreams, and Astrid wondered what she had brought into her home. What strange creature lay in her cabin, wrapped in bandages and firelight? And why, when she looked into those intelligent eyes, did she feel as though something fundamental had shifted in the world? The fire burned low. Astrid closed her own eyes just for a moment, just to rest. When she woke, dawn light filtered through the shutters, pale and weak. The pup still slept, its chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. The splint held. The bleeding had stopped. She checked the stitches, found them clean and tight. Good, it might survive after all. Astrid moved through her morning routine, feeding the fire, preparing thin broth from dried meat. The pup woke when she approached, flinched at first, then relaxed when she set down a bowl of water. It drank greedily, lapping with a pink tongue, those golden eyes never leaving her face. Intelligent, too intelligent. She had seen wolves before, even treated an injured one years ago when she was learning her craft. But none of them looked at her the way this one did. None of them seemed to understand her words when she spoke softly, telling it to stay still, to rest, to heal. This one tilted its head when she talked, responded to the tone of her voice, watched her hands as she worked, as though memorizing every movement. Impossible, she told herself, and yet every time it looked at her, she felt that impossibility cracking. Days passed. The storm continued, burying the world in white. Astrid tended the pup, changed its dressings, coaxed it to eat small amounts of meat. It healed faster than it should. By the third day, it could put weight on the injured leg. And always, always it watched her with those eyes that held far too much understanding. On the fourth day, Astrid ventured out to collect more firewood from the pile behind her cabin. The storm had finally broken, leaving the world hushed and transformed beneath a blanket of white. The air burned in her lungs, crisp and clean. She gathered an armful of logs, paused to survey her small domain, and froze. Footprints. human footprints in the fresh snow, circling her cabin. Multiple sets, made by at least 3 different men, judging by the size and depth. Her heart hammered in her chest. No one from the village would travel this far in winter, not even to check on her. These prints led from the forest, circled her home, and returned the way they came. Someone had been watching her. Astrid dropped the wood, hand going to the knife at her belt as she spun in a slow circle. The forest stood silent around her, giving no hint of the watchers, but they had been here, recently. She gathered the fallen wood quickly, hurried back inside. The pup sat alert on the table, ears pricked forward, a low growl rumbling in its chest. "You feel it too," she whispered, barring the door. Night fell quickly in the mountains, shadows stretching long across the snow. Astrid kept the fire burning bright, her crossbow loaded and close at hand. Her father's old military sword hung above the mantel. She took it down, tested its edge. Still sharp. She hadn't used it since Tormund died, but her body remembered the weight, the balance. She fed the pup, changed its bandages. The wound had nearly closed, the skin knitting together with unnatural speed. When she finished, she sat by the fire, the sword across her knees, and waited. They came at midnight. She knew by the pup's sudden alertness, its hackles rising as it stared at the door. A moment later, she heard it too, the crunch of snow beneath boots, the low murmur of voices. Astrid rose silently, positioned herself between the door and the pup. The crossbow in her hands was steady. She had killed before, in the war, would kill again if necessary. The door rattled as someone tested the bar. Astrid took aim. Then came the voice, low and harsh. "We know you're in there, woman. We know what you're harboring. Give us the pup, and we'll spare your life." She said nothing, finger steady on the trigger. "That creature is not what you think," the voice continued. "It's dangerous, an abomination that must be destroyed." The pup growled, a sound far deeper than should be possible from so small a body. "You have until dawn," the voice said. "Give us the beast, or we burn this place to the ground with you in it." Footsteps retreated. Silence fell again, but Astrid knew they hadn't gone far. They would be watching, waiting. She turned to the pup, found those amber eyes fixed on her face. Understanding passed between them, an impossible communication. The creature knew it was hunted, knew she was now in danger because of it. Astrid made her decision. She gathered supplies, food, weapons, medicines, and packed them in a leather satchel. Then she approached the pup. "I don't know what you are," she said softly, "but I'm not giving you to them. If they fled now, used the darkness for cover, they might reach the eastern pass before dawn. From there, they could follow the old mining trails deeper into the mountains, places where even the bravest hunters feared to tread." She lifted the pup, wrapped it once more in her cloak. It nuzzled against her neck, a gesture of trust that tightened her resolve. Astrid doused the fire, plunging the cabin into darkness. She waited for her eyes to adjust, then moved to the back window, the smallest, the one most easily overlooked by watchers. Slowly, carefully, she worked it open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and snow. The pup tensed in her arms as she climbed through the narrow opening, dropping silently into the deep snow beyond. Her military training came back. How to move quietly, how to use terrain, how to disappear. She pressed close to the cabin wall, listening for sounds of pursuit. Nothing. She made her move, darting from the cabin to the cover of the trees. The snow sparkled beneath the moon, too bright, too exposing. But she knew these woods better than any hunter, knew where the shadows lay deepest. Astrid ran, the pup clutched to her chest. Behind them, the cabin stood dark and abandoned, a chapter of her life closed forever. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and something else, something she couldn't name, a feeling that this golden-eyed creature was leading her toward a fate written in the stars long before she was born. The night embraced them, hid them in its velvet depths, and as they vanished into the ancient forest, miles away, in a fortress of stone and shadow, Leaf Blackthorn stared at the empty bed in his son's chamber and felt panic claw at his chest. Fenrir was gone. The realization had come at dawn when guards noticed the window standing open, snow piling on the sill. His 12-year-old son, the heir to every shifter pack in the Northern Territories, had climbed down the fortress wall and disappeared into the wilderness. Because of him, because Leif had pushed too hard, demanded too much, had seen only the future king and forgotten the frightened boy. The words from their argument echoed in his mind. You want me to be a soldier, not your son." Leif had not known what to say, had stood there silent, while Fenrir's eyes filled with tears he refused to shed, while his boy turned and ran. Now Bjorn Ironwolf stood beside him, red-haired and grim-faced, waiting for orders. The warrior's left eye, milky white and sightless from an old battle wound, seemed to judge him. "Assemble a small group, our most trusted. No one else can know." Bjorn nodded. "My king." "The storm." "I know, we go anyway." Because somewhere out there, his son was alone and hurt and afraid. Leif could feel it through the blood bond they shared, that ancient connection between alpha and heir. Pain, sharp and bright, followed by a strange calm that worried him more than panic would. He would find his son. He would bring him home. But first there was the matter of the hunters. Leif's nostrils flared as he caught a familiar scent, silver and ash, the stench of those who had hunted his kind for centuries. The silver-blood hunters had grown bold recently, venturing closer to the fortress than ever before. Had they found Fenrir? The thought sent ice through his veins. "My scouts report a small cabin in the eastern valley," Bjorn said, reading his thoughts. "A human woman lives there alone. There are signs of silver-blood activity nearby." "How close?" "Too close. They discovered tracks this morning, a wolf pup's prints leading to her door, none leading away." Leif's heart stuttered. Could it be? Had his son found shelter with a human? "Prepare the men. We leave within the hour." Bjorn hesitated. "The council will object, taking warriors outside our territory, revealing ourselves to humans." "The council be damned!" Leif snarled, his voice deepening to a growl. "This is my son!" The wind howled outside the fortress walls, and Leif embraced it, followed the fading thread of his son's presence northward into the storm. The village sat in a valley between two mountain ridges, small and weathered and stubborn in the way of northern settlements that have survived 100 winters. Smoke rose from stone chimneys, voices carried on the cold air, muffled by distance and snow. Leif watched from the tree line, his breath forming clouds in the frigid morning. 4 days since Fenrir disappeared. 4 days of following a trail that grew fainter with each passing hour, obscured by fresh snowfall and his own growing desperation. The bond told him his son lived, told him Fenrir was somewhere north of this place, hidden among the peaks. But the bond did not tell him exactly where, and the mountains stretched for leagues in every direction. He needed information, supplies, a sense of whether anyone in this village had seen a boy traveling alone, or a wolf with golden fur. "My lord." Bjorn appeared at his shoulder, silent as always despite his bulk. "Should we split up? Cover more ground?" "No." Leif's voice came out rougher than intended. "We stay together, draw less attention that way." The captain nodded, understanding without explanation. A group of armed warriors would raise questions in a village this size. 2 travelers, one clearly a merchant by the quality of his furs and the weight of his coin purse, would barely merit a second glance. They had left the others camped in the forest, waiting. Leif could not risk bringing his full guard into a human settlement, could not risk word spreading that the northern lords were searching for something in the mountains. Some secrets were too dangerous to expose. The village proper consisted of perhaps 30 buildings clustered around a central square. A blacksmith worked his forge despite the cold, hammer ringing against iron. Women carried water from the well, bundled in layers of wool and fur. Children darted between houses, their laughter high and bright. Normal, peaceful, unaware that a shifter king walked among their mountains. Leif and Bjorn made their way to the largest structure, a long hall that served as both tavern and meeting place. Inside, warmth hit them in a wave. A fire roared in the central pit. Men sat at rough tables drinking ale and speaking in low voices. The conversation stuttered when they entered, eyes tracking the strangers with cautious curiosity. Leif removed his hood, let them see his face, let them see the silver threaded through his dark beard, the bearing of someone accustomed to command, someone with money to spend. The tavern keeper approached, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Welcome, travelers. Storm catch you unprepared?" Something like that. Leif settled onto a bench, gestured for ale. "We are searching for my nephew, a boy of 12, fair-haired. He ran off after an argument with his father. We believe he came this way." The keeper shook his head slowly. "Haven't seen any boys traveling alone. Not in this weather. He would freeze to death out there." "Perhaps someone took him in, gave him shelter." "Perhaps. But folks here would have mentioned it. Not many strangers pass through in winter." Leif accepted the ale, drank to cover his frustration. 4 days, and still nothing. No sign, no word. Only that persistent pull northward through the bond, constant and unchanging. Bjorn leaned forward, his voice casual. We heard tell of a woman who lives alone in the mountains. A healer of some kind. Would she take in a lost boy? The keeper's expression shifted, became guarded. The widow Vinter keeps to herself, has done since her man died at Battered Ridge. She comes down for supplies now and then, but mostly stays away. Could you send word to her? Ask if she's seen... She does not welcome visitors. The keeper's tone brooked no argument. And with respect, sirs, you should not be wandering the high country in winter. The passes are deadly once the storms come. Leif set down his cup with careful precision. We will take that under advisement. He caught Bjorn's eye, saw his own thoughts reflected there. A woman living alone in the mountains, north of the village. A woman who knew the terrain, who might have found a boy or a wolf in need of help. Worth investigating. The tavern door swung open, bringing a gust of wind and snow. And something else. A scent that made every instinct in Leif's body snap to attention. Fenrir, faint, days old but unmistakable. A woman entered, stamping snow from her boots. She was smaller than the other villagers, lean in the way of someone who works hard and eats little. Her dark hair hung in a single braid down her back, and her eyes, gray as winter ice, scanned the room with quick efficiency before settling on the tavern keeper. Astrid, the keeper's greeting held warmth. Didn't expect to see you so soon. Ran low on thread. She set a basket on the bar, began removing bundles of dried herbs. And I need salt. Flour if you have any to spare. Her voice was low, steady, carrying none of the deference most human women showed in the presence of strange men. She did not look at Leif or Bjorn, but he sensed her awareness of them, saw the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her hand stayed close to the knife at her belt. Smart, a woman alone learned to be cautious. The scent of Fenrir clung to her clothes, mixed with herbs and smoke, and something he could not quite identify. She had been near his son recently, within the last day or two. Leif rose slowly, careful not to appear threatening. Forgive the intrusion. I could not help but overhear, you live in the mountains? Those gray eyes finally turned to him, and the impact was unexpected. Sharp, assessing. She took in his fine furs, his weapons, the way Bjorn hovered protectively at his back, and made her judgment in the space of a heartbeat. I do. We are searching for a lost boy, 12 years old, fair. Have you seen anyone matching that description? No. The answer came too quickly, too firmly. She was lying, or at least hiding something. What about animals? We heard there was a wolf in the area, possibly injured. The boy had been tracking it, thought he could help. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, concern. It vanished before he could be certain. I have not seen any wolves. Another lie, he was sure of it now. Astrid finished her trading quickly, efficient and practiced. The tavern keeper tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her health, her supplies for winter. She answered in monosyllables, already moving toward the door. Leif followed her outside. Wait. She did not stop walking, did not turn. Please, just a moment of your time. That made her pause. She faced him in the middle of the snow-covered square, and up close he could see the fatigue in her face, the shadows under her eyes. This was a woman who had not slept properly in days, a woman carrying some burden she would not share. I have told you what I know, which is nothing. I don't believe you. The bluntness made her blink, then her expression hardened. I don't care what you believe. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a long walk ahead. Let me help you, at least to the edge of the village. I don't need help. She turned again, and this time Leif let her go, watched her stride across the square toward the northern trail, her basket slung over one shoulder, her spine straight despite obvious exhaustion. Bjorn appeared at his side. She smells like Fenrir. I know. Should we follow? Not yet. Leif's mind worked through possibilities, discarding and reconsidering. She was frightened, protective. If they pushed too hard now, she might take Fenrir and run somewhere even more remote, somewhere Leif might never find them. Better to give her space, let her think she had escaped scrutiny, then follow once she believed herself safe. But there was something else bothering him, something beyond the scent of his son on her clothes. When she looked at him, just for an instant, he had felt it. That pull beneath his skin, that recognition his wolf gives when it senses something important. Impossible. She was human. And even if she were not, he was a widower with no interest in taking another mate. His wife, Sigrid, had died 8 years ago, and that wound had long since scarred over into numbness. This woman meant nothing to him, except as a potential lead to finding Fenrir. He repeated that to himself as they made their way back to the tree line, as Bjorn organized the other warriors for the next phase of the search. As Leif stared north toward the mountains and felt the double pull of his missing son and something else he refused to name. The sun climbed higher, weak and pale behind clouds. The woman, Astrid, disappeared into the forest, following a trail only she seemed to know. And Leif began to plan how he would reach her cabin before nightfall. In the mountains, Astrid walked faster than she should on icy trails, her heart hammering against her ribs. That man, those golden eyes that saw too much, asked too many questions. He knew something, or suspected. She thought of the pup waiting in her cabin, curled by the fire, thought of how it watched her with those same golden eyes, too intelligent, too aware, and she wondered if she had just lied to the one person who might have answers to the questions keeping her awake at night. She thought, too, of the traps she had found scattered through the forest over the past days, silver-ruined and deadly, set by men who knew exactly what they were hunting, men who had threatened to burn her home with her inside it. Behind her, unseen in the trees, two figures began to follow her trail north. The eastern pass loomed before them, a jagged mouth carved between ancient peaks. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the snow-covered mountains with pale gold light. Astrid clutched the wolf pup to her chest, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. They had traveled through the night, using darkness for cover, pushing forward despite exhaustion that made her legs tremble and her vision blur. She dared not stop, not with the silver-blood hunters behind them. Twice during the night, she had glimpsed them in the distance, shadows moving against the moonlit snow, tracking her with the relentless patience of men who had hunted their prey for generations. They would not give up easily. The pup in her arms was too valuable, too hated. The wolf stirred against her, its golden eyes watching the pass ahead with an alertness that continued to unnerve her. No ordinary animal could understand their situation so clearly. No ordinary wolf would remain so calm in the face of such danger. "Almost there," she whispered, as much to herself as to the creature. The pass was dangerous in winter, a narrow trail flanked by sheer drops and prone to avalanches. Few from the village dared travel it even in summer, but it offered their best chance of losing the hunters. Beyond lay the old mining tunnels, a labyrinth of passages cut by men long dead, following veins of silver deep into the mountain's heart. If they could reach those tunnels, they might find shelter, might disappear into the maze where even the most determined hunters would hesitate to follow. Astrid adjusted the satchel on her shoulder and began the ascent, picking her way carefully over ice-slicked stone. The pup remained eerily silent, as though it understood the need for stealth. The climb was grueling. Each step required careful consideration. A wrong foothold meant death on the rocks below. The wind cut through her layers, stealing warmth and breath. The pup's weight, light at first, grew heavier with each passing hour. By midday, they reached the summit of the pass, a flat shelf of rock barely wide enough for two men to stand abreast. Astrid sank to her knees, allowing herself a moment's rest. The pup squirmed free of her cloak, limping to the edge to look down at the world below. The view was breathtaking. Valleys and forests stretched beneath them. The village a tiny cluster of smoke and stone in the distance, and beyond, far to the north, a structure she had never seen before rose from the mountainside. A fortress. Massive and ancient, its stone walls blending with the mountain as though carved from the living rock. Towers reached toward the sky, and even from this distance, she could see movement along the battlements, figures too small to identify. The pup stared at the fortress, ears forward, body tense with recognition. A soft whine escaped its throat, filled with longing. "Is that home?" Astrid asked softly. The wolf turned to her, and something passed between them, a wordless communication she could not explain but felt in her bones. Yes, that was home. And something waited there, something important. Astrid squinted at the fortress, trying to make sense of its existence. No one in the village had ever mentioned such a structure. How could something so massive remain unknown? The answer came slowly, like remembering a dream. Her grandmother's voice, telling old stories by firelight. The Veil Walkers hide in plain sight, child, their strongholds hidden by mist and magic, visible only to those with the blood or those they wish to see. Magic. She had dismissed such tales as fantasy, had prided herself on being practical, on dealing in herbs and stitches and things she could touch with her hands. Yet here she knelt, staring at a fortress that should not exist, with a wolf pup that healed too quickly and watched her with too human eyes. Perhaps some stories held more truth than she had allowed herself to believe. The pup nudged her hand with its nose, urging her onward. Astrid nodded. They could not linger. The hunters would be closing in. She rose stiffly, muscles protesting after the brief rest. The descent would be more treacherous than the climb, steeper, with loose shale that shifted underfoot. But the mining tunnels awaited, offering shelter from both pursuers and the coming night. The pup limped ahead, leading the way with surprising confidence for an animal in unfamiliar territory. Astrid followed, wondering if it somehow knew these mountains, if its kind had traveled these paths before. They had made it halfway down when the arrow struck the rock beside her head. Astrid threw herself against the cliff face, pulling the pup with her as shale cascaded into the abyss. Heart pounding, she scanned the mountainside above. 3 figures stood at the summit, silhouetted against the sky. One knocked another arrow, while the others began descending, moving with practiced ease over terrain that had nearly defeated her. The Silverbloods had found them. "Run!" she hissed to the pup, shoving it ahead. "Go!" The wolf hesitated, looking back at her with those intelligent eyes. "Go!" she insisted, drawing her knife. It was a poor weapon against bows, but all she had at hand. Her crossbow remained in the satchel, unstrung and useless in the moments that mattered. The pup made a decision. Instead of fleeing down the path, it darted to a narrow crevice in the rock face, a split barely visible unless one knew to look. It squeezed inside, then turned, eyes gleaming from the darkness, calling her to follow. Astrid didn't hesitate. She dove for the opening as another arrow clattered against the rocks. The crevice was tight, too tight for the bulky hunters to follow, but she was lean from hard years alone. She forced herself through, scraping skin from her shoulders and hips until she tumbled into darkness beyond. The crevice opened into a tunnel, smooth-walled and man-made, clearly part of the abandoned mines. The pup waited several paces ahead, its golden eyes reflecting what little light filtered through the entrance. "Clever boy," Astrid whispered, regaining her feet. "How did you know?" The wolf merely turned and limped deeper into the tunnel. Astrid fumbled in her satchel for a stub of candle and flint. Light flared, revealing ancient timbers supporting a passage that stretched into darkness. From outside came shouts of frustration. The hunters had reached the spot where she disappeared, but the crevice was indeed too narrow for their broader frames. They would need to find another entrance to the mines, which meant she and the pup had time, but not much. They moved deeper into the mountain, the candlelight casting grotesque shadows on the walls. The air grew cold and stale, heavy with the scent of minerals and old death. Rats scurried ahead of them, their eyes gleaming red in the darkness. The tunnel forked repeatedly, offering countless paths to become hopelessly lost. But the pup never hesitated, choosing each turn with purpose, leading her deeper into the labyrinth. After what felt like hours, they emerged into a vast chamber, a natural cavern the miners had expanded. Massive columns of stone reached from floor to ceiling, formed over millennia by water dripping through living rock. A small underground lake filled one side of the chamber, its surface black and still as glass. The pup approached the water, drank deeply, then turned to Astrid with expectation in its eyes. "We're staying here?" she asked, surveying the chamber. It was defensible, with only one entrance. The lake provided water, and the natural beauty of the place offered a strange comfort after the harrowing flight through the mountains. The wolf settled onto a flat stone near the water, clearly exhausted by their journey. Its wounded legs stretched awkwardly to the side, reminding Astrid that despite its remarkable healing, it was still injured, still vulnerable. She checked the splint, adjusted the bandages, applied more of the wolf shield salve to combat any lingering silver poisoning. The wound was healing cleanly, far faster than she would have believed possible. Another day or two, and the pup might be able to walk without limping. But that still didn't explain what this creature truly was, or why the Silverblood hunters were so determined to destroy it. Astrid built a small fire from timbers scavenged from collapsed sections of the mine. The flames cast dancing light across the cavern, transforming the stone columns into sentinels that stood eternal watch. She prepared a simple meal of dried meat and herbs, offering some to the pup, which accepted gratefully. As they ate in companionable silence, Astrid's mind returned to the man in the village, the one with golden eyes so like the pup's. He had been searching for a boy, not an animal. Yet he had asked about a wolf, and there had been something in his bearing, something regal and ancient that had made her skin prickle with recognition. If the old stories were true, if the Veil Walkers still existed, Astrid looked at the pup with new understanding. "You're not really a wolf, are you?" "Not entirely." The pup met her gaze steadily, intelligence burning in those amber depths. "That man in the village, he's looking for you. He's your father, isn't he?" The wolf flinched at the word father, ears flattening against its skull. A low growl rumbled in its chest, not threatening, but pained. "You ran away," Astrid concluded softly. "Why? What did he do?" The pup offered no answer, merely watching her with those two knowing eyes. Of course it couldn't speak. Whatever this creature was, it was currently trapped in its animal form. Astrid sighed, leaning back against a stone column. "I wish you could tell me your story. I wish I understood what I've stepped into." She closed her eyes, bone-deep exhaustion washing over her. They were safe for the moment. The hunters would take time to find another entrance to the mines, and even then, they would need to navigate the labyrinth of tunnels. She could rest briefly, gather strength for whatever came next. Sleep claimed her almost instantly, pulling her into dreams filled with golden eyes and silver blades, with fortresses that appeared from mist and wolves that walked as men. She woke to the sound of breaking bone. The fire had burned low, casting the cavern in deep shadow. Astrid bolted upright, knife in hand before conscious thought could form. The wolf pup lay several yards away, its body contorting unnaturally. Bones cracked and shifted beneath skin that seemed to ripple and flow like water. The creature made no sound, despite what must be excruciating pain. Astrid started forward, healer's instincts driving her to help, to ease suffering. Then she froze as understanding dawned. This was no injury or illness. This was transformation. The pup's golden fur receded into pale skin, limbs elongated, spine straightened. The muzzle shortened, flattened, reshaped itself into a human face. Paws became hands and feet. The process took minutes that felt like hours, each second marked by the wet sound of restructuring flesh. When it ended, a boy lay naked and shivering on the stone floor of the cavern. Perhaps 12 years old, with fair hair and the same golden eyes that had watched her from the wolf's face. His wounded leg still bore the marks of the trap, a brutal scar that would likely remain for life. Astrid approached slowly, removing her outer tunic to cover the child's nakedness. The boy watched her warily, trying to control his trembling. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough from disuse, "for saving me." "You're welcome." Astrid knelt beside him, physician's eyes assessing his condition. The transformation had clearly drained him. His skin was pallid, lips tinged blue. "How do you feel?" "Weak." He struggled to sit up, accepting her help with reluctant gratitude. "Hungry." Astrid retrieved more dried meat from her satchel, offering it with a water skin. The boy ate ravenously, golden eyes never leaving her face. "My name is Astrid," she said when he had finished. "Will you tell me yours?" The boy hesitated, clearly weighing how much to trust her. "Fenrir," he said finally. "My name is Fenrir Blackthorn." Blackthorn, a surname that carried weight, even spoken in this hidden place beneath the mountain. "Your father is looking for you," Astrid said gently. Fenrir's expression hardened. "I know. I can feel him through the blood bond. He's getting closer." "Why did you run, Fenrir? What happened?" The boy stared into the dying fire, shadows playing across his young face, making him look far older than his years. "He wants me to be someone I'm not. Wants me to be ready to lead, to fight, to kill if necessary." "You're very young for such burdens." "I'm heir to the northern packs, the only heir since my mother died." His voice caught. "Father says I must be strong enough to protect our people. That war is coming with the Silverbloods, that I cannot afford to be a child." Astrid heard the echo of her own childhood in his words, of her father's stern lessons in warfare and survival, of being shaped into a weapon before she understood what that meant. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "adults forget that strength comes in many forms, that children need time to grow into their power, not have it forced upon them." Fenrir looked at her with surprise, as though he had never heard an adult express such thoughts. "Father says there is no time, that the Silverbloods grow bolder each season, that they have new weapons against our kind." "The silver traps," Astrid nodded. "I found several in the forest this past month. more than in all the years before. They're preparing for something. Father believes they mean to attack our stronghold directly. Fenrir's fingers brushed unconsciously against the scar on his leg. I couldn't bear the training anymore. Couldn't stand another day of being told I wasn't enough, wasn't ready. So I ran, and fell into their trap instead. The boy's shoulders slumped. I was careless, stupid. I nearly died because I was too weak to free myself. Father was right about me all along. No. Astrid's voice was firm. You survived. You found help. You led us to safety when the hunters came. Those aren't the actions of someone weak. Fenrir looked up, hope flickering in his golden eyes. You don't think I'm a coward for running? I think you're a child who needed a respite from impossible expectations. She smiled gently. I ran too once. From my village, from people who wanted me to be something I wasn't ready to become. What happened? I found my own way. Built a life that made sense to me. She thought of her cabin, probably ashes by now, if the hunters had made good on their threat. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. They fell silent, the weight of shared understanding hanging between them. The fire crackled, sending sparks dancing toward the cavern ceiling. What will you do when your father finds us? Astrid asked finally. I don't know. Fenrir pulled her tunic tighter around his thin shoulders. I can't go back to the way things were. I won't. Then perhaps it's time to tell him that. The boy laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. You don't know my father. He is King Leaf Blackthorn, Alpha of the Northern Territories. No one tells him anything. I met him in the village, Astrid said. He seemed worried, not angry. He worries I will die before I can fulfill my purpose. That doesn't mean he understands. Astrid was about to respond when Fenrir suddenly stiffened, head cocked as though listening to sounds beyond human hearing. His golden eyes widened. Someone's coming, he whispered. Many someones. Astrid reached for her crossbow, finally extracting it from her satchel and stringing it with practiced hands. Hunters? Fenrir shook his head, nostrils flaring as he scented the air. No, my father. And Silverbloods, both coming, from different directions. How long? Minutes, maybe less. Astrid handed the boy his clothes, still stiff with dried blood, but better than nothing. Can you shift back? Would that be safer? No, the transformation drained me. I won't be able to shift again until I've rested properly. Which left them with a wounded boy and a single crossbow against whatever approached. Astrid positioned herself between Fenrir and the tunnel entrance, weapon raised. Stay behind me, she ordered. If I fall, run deeper into the mines. Don't look back. Fenrir shook his head stubbornly. I won't leave you. This isn't a debate, Astrid snapped, falling into the familiar cadence of a military commander. You will survive. That is your only objective. Do you understand? The boy's jaw set in a stubborn line that reminded her painfully of his father, but he nodded reluctantly. The first sign came as a whisper of movement in the tunnel, a scrape of leather on stone, the soft clink of metal. Astrid steadied her breathing, finger poised on the trigger. One shot. She would have one shot before they were upon her. A shadow appeared at the tunnel entrance, taller and broader than a normal man. Astrid aimed for the center mass. Then the figure stepped into the firelight, and she found herself staring into the golden eyes of Leif Blackthorn. His gaze found hers first. Recognition, and something more complex flashing in those amber depths. Then he looked past her to the boy, and his face transformed with naked relief. Fenrir, he breathed. Father? The boy's voice was small but steady. Leif took a step forward, then froze as Astrid kept her crossbow trained on his chest. I mean no harm, he said, hands raised slightly. You're trespassing, Astrid replied, keeping her voice level. This boy is under my protection. Something dangerous flickered in Leif's eyes, a reminder that beneath the human form lurked a creature of fang and claw. But he controlled it, inclining his head in acknowledgement of her claim. And you have my gratitude for that protection. But Fenrir is my son. I've come to take him home. Perhaps he doesn't wish to go. The words hung in the cavern, dangerous as a drawn blade. Leif's eyes narrowed, darting to the boy behind her. Is this true? He asked, voice rough with emotion. You would refuse your home, your people? Fenrir stepped forward, placing himself at Astrid's side. Despite his exhaustion and the oversized clothes hanging from his thin frame, he stood with surprising dignity. I will not return to being a weapon for you to shape, he said quietly. I am your son before I am your heir. Leif flinched as though struck. For a moment, Naked pain transformed his features, making him look suddenly vulnerable despite his size and strength. Fenrir. But whatever he might have said was lost as Bjorn Ironwolf burst into the chamber, breathing hard. My king, Silverbloods, at least 6 coming through the eastern tunnels. Leif's expression hardened instantly, the momentary vulnerability vanishing behind a warrior's mask. How long? Minutes, no time to escape. Astrid lowered her crossbow fractionally. There's another way out, through the lake. She gestured to the still water. The miners used it to transport ore. There's an underwater tunnel that leads to the river valley. Leif assessed her with new respect. You know these mines well. My husband was a miner before he was a soldier. He taught me the old escape routes. She did not add that she had explored them herself in the dark days after Tormund's death, half hoping to find her own end in the lightless depths. Fenrir cannot swim in his human form, Leif said. Not with that leg. I'll manage, the boy insisted. No need. Bjorn shouldered past his king, approaching Fenrir with determined strides. I'll carry the pup. Fenrir bristled at being called pup, but didn't protest as the massive warrior knelt before him. Arms around my neck, Bjorn instructed gruffly. Hold your breath when I tell you. Astrid looked to Leif. And you? I'll hold them off. His hand moved to the sword at his belt, a massive blade that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the firelight. Give you time to get clear. Alone? Astrid shook her head. That's suicide. I am not so easy to kill. A grim smile touched his lips. Go, take my son to safety. Father, no! Fenrir struggled in Bjorn's grip. You can't stay behind. Leif approached his son, resting one large hand on the boy's head in a gesture of benediction. I have failed you in many ways. Let me do this one thing right. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the tunnel, accompanied by the acrid scent of silver and ash. The Silverbloods were close. Astrid made a decision. She thrust her crossbow into Bjorn's free hand. Take him. Head due east when you exit the tunnel. You'll reach the fortress by nightfall. What about you? Bjorn asked, eyes narrowed with suspicion. I'm staying. She drew her knife and her father's sword. 2 blades are better than 1. Leif stared at her, golden eyes widening with surprise and something that might have been admiration. This is not your fight. They threatened to burn my home. They hunted a child. Astrid tested the sword's balance, muscle memory returning after years of disuse. I'd say that makes it very much my fight. A moment of understanding passed between them. Recognition of a shared warrior's code that transcended the differences in their species. Leif nodded once, accepting her decision. Bjorn, go. Get Fenrir to the fortress. Alert the council. My king. That's an order, Captain. Bjorn's face tightened with frustration, but he obeyed, securing his grip on the protesting boy and wading into the black water of the underground lake. Breathe deep, he instructed Fenrir. Hold until I tap your shoulder. Then they were gone, disappearing beneath the obsidian surface with barely a ripple. Astrid positioned herself beside Leif, facing the tunnel entrance. The approaching footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the soft clink of weapons being drawn. You're a formidable woman, Astrid Winter, Leif said quietly, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. And you're not what I expected from the stories, she replied. A soft laugh escaped him. What did you expect? A monster with slavering jaws? Something like that. Perhaps you'll see those yet. His voice deepened slightly, a growl edging his words. If this goes poorly. You mean if we die? I mean if I need to show them why my kind has survived their hunts for 1,000 years. The first Silverblood appeared at the tunnel entrance, a tall man in leather armor studded with silver. His face was hidden behind a half-mask of polished metal, eyes visible as dark slits. In his hands he carried a crossbow larger than Astrid's, already loaded with a silver-tipped bolt. 5 more hunters filed in behind him, spreading out to block the tunnel, all masked, all armed with silver weapons designed specifically to kill Veilwalkers. The wolf pup and the woman, the lead hunter said, voice muffled behind his mask. Where are they? Leif stepped forward, placing himself squarely in their path. The sword in his hand seemed to drink the firelight, its blade darkening to the color of old blood. You trespass on shifter territory, he said, voice carrying the weight of command. Leave now, and I may let you live. The hunters laughed, a chilling sound without mirth. Bold words from a lone wolf, the leader said. Where is your pack, Alpha? Where is your heir? Safe from you. Leif's stance widened slightly, preparing for combat, which is more than I can say for your men. The leader raised his crossbow. Last chance. Tell us where they went, and your death will be quick. Astrid felt a strange calm settle over her, the familiar clarity that came before battle. Time seemed to slow, her senses sharpening as her body prepared for violence. "You know," she said conversationally, "I was just beginning to believe in fairy tales again." She raised her father's sword. "Pity you had to ruin it." When the leader fired, Leif moved with inhuman speed, sword flashing as he deflected the bolt into the stone wall. The sound of metal striking metal rang through the cavern. Then chaos erupted. The hunters charged as one, silver blades gleaming in the firelight. Leif met them with a roar that shook dust from the ceiling, his sword cutting a deadly arc that caught the first man across the chest. Astrid ducked beneath the swinging blade, coming up inside her attacker's guard. Her knife found the gap between armor pieces, sliding into soft flesh. The man screamed, staggering backward. They fought with the desperate energy of those outnumbered, using the close quarters to their advantage. Leif's fighting style was unlike anything Astrid had seen before. A fluid grace that spoke of centuries of martial tradition, blended with the raw power of his inhuman nature. Where her movements were precise and economical, his were almost beautiful in their controlled violence. A hunter lunged at Astrid's blindside. She pivoted too slowly, feeling the bite of silver against her ribs. Pain flared, but training kept her moving, her father's sword separating the man's head from his shoulders in a clean strike. Leif dispatched 2 more hunters with brutal efficiency, his blade now slick with blood. But the leader and 1 remaining man pressed forward, forcing them back toward the underground lake. "You fight well for a human," the leader called to Astrid, circling warily. "Why defend this animal? Do you know what they are? What they've done?" "I know what you've done," Astrid replied, ignoring the burning pain in her side. "Hunted a child, threatened an innocent." "There are no innocent wolves," the leader snarled. "Only monsters waiting to reveal themselves." He lunged suddenly, faster than she expected. Astrid parried, but the force of his attack drove her backward. Her boots slipped on the wet stone at the lake's edge. She fell, landing hard on her wounded side. The leader stood over her, silver blade raised for the killing stroke. "Die with your beast," he spat. The blow never fell. Leif appeared between them, moving so quickly he seemed to blur. But something had changed. His form rippled, bones cracking as he partially shifted, not fully wolf, but no longer fully man. Claws extended from his fingers, teeth lengthened into fangs. His golden eyes blazed with an inner fire that illuminated the cavern more brightly than their small campfire. The leader faltered, fear finally breaking through his zealotry. Leif seized him by the throat with 1 clawed hand, lifting him effortlessly from the ground. "You threatened my son," he growled, voice distorted by his partial transformation. "You hunted what is mine." The remaining hunter fled, disappearing into the tunnel with a cry of terror. The leader struggled in Leif's grasp, silver dagger stabbing wildly. Several blows landed, drawing blood that steamed in the cool air of the cavern. But Leif seemed beyond pain, beyond reason. "Stop!" Astrid commanded, regaining her feet. "Leif, don't kill him!" The Shifter King turned his transformed face toward her, feral rage burning in those golden eyes. For a moment she thought he could not listen. Then something human reasserted itself in his gaze. His grip on the hunter loosened slightly. "Why should I spare him?" he growled. "He would not spare you, or my son." "Because if you kill him like this, you prove his point," Astrid said quietly. "You become the monster he believes you to be." The words struck home. Leif's form shuddered, bones realigning as he forced himself back toward humanity. The claws receded, the fangs shortened. Only his eyes remained unchanged, burning with golden fire. He dropped the hunter, who fell gasping to the stone floor. "Run!" Leif snarled. "Tell your people what you saw here. Tell them that Leif Blackthorn could have taken your life but chose mercy. Tell them what that means." The man scrambled backward, terror plain even behind his silver mask. Then he turned and fled, following his companion into the darkness of the tunnel. Leif watched him go, chest heaving with exertion. Blood seeped from multiple wounds where silver had pierced his flesh, each cut smoking slightly in the cavern air. "You're hurt," Astrid said, approaching him cautiously. "As are you." He nodded to the gash in her side, which had soaked her tunic with blood. "I've had worse." She sheathed her father's sword, feeling the familiar ache of combat in her muscles. It had been years since she had fought like that, years since she had felt so alive. "Can you make it to the lake?" Leif nodded grimly. "We should hurry. They'll return with reinforcements." They waded into the black water, cold seeping through clothing and into bone. Astrid led the way, remembering Tormund's instructions from what felt like a lifetime ago. 20 strokes straight out, then down. There's an underwater tunnel. It feels long, but it's manageable in one breath if you stay calm. Leif's golden eyes studied her face in the dim light. You've done this before. Once? She didn't elaborate. Understanding passed between them, another fragment of shared experience that needed no words. Together then, he said simply. Side by side, they dove into the darkness, leaving blood and battle behind, swimming toward whatever awaited beyond. The underground river carried them through darkness absolute. Astrid fought the instinct to gasp as frigid currents tumbled her body through the narrow passage. Her lungs burned, muscles screamed for oxygen. The wound in her side throbbed with each heartbeat, trailing blood that dissipated into the blackness around them. She had made this journey once before, in those dark days after Tormund's death, when grief had driven her to test the boundaries between life and oblivion. Then she had secretly hoped the passage would prove too long, the water too cold. That fate would make the decision she lacked courage to make herself. Now she fought, each stroke deliberate. Each second of oxygen preserved a victory against the crushing dark. Beside her, Leif's presence registered only as movement, a disturbance in the water. She could not see him, could not hear him, but somehow she felt him, a certainty that she was not alone in this lightless journey. Just when spots began to dance before her eyes, when the urge to breathe threatened to overwhelm her discipline, her outstretched hands met emptiness. The tunnel opened. She kicked upward, breaking the surface with a desperate gasp. Leif emerged beside her a moment later, drawing air into his lungs with a sound that was half growl, half human. They tread water in silence for several moments, simply breathing. The cavern around them gleamed with phosphorescent algae, casting everything in an ethereal blue-green glow. "We made it," Astrid said finally, voice echoing against stone walls. "Thanks to your knowledge." Leif's golden eyes reflected the dim light, gleaming like coins in the darkness. "Few humans know these ancient ways. Tormund showed me." She began swimming toward the shore, a narrow strip of sand at the cavern's edge. "My husband, he explored these mines as a boy." They dragged themselves from the water, collapsing onto the sand. The chill air raised gooseflesh on Astrid's arms. Her clothes, heavy with water, clung to her body like a second skin. The wound in her side had stopped bleeding, the cold water having constricted the blood vessels, but now it began to throb with renewed vigor. Leif was worse. The multiple silver wounds smoked faintly in the dim light, an unnatural reaction that spoke of deep magic and ancient enmities. His breathing was labored, face drawn with pain he refused to acknowledge. "We need to keep moving," he said, rising unsteadily to his feet. "The hunters will find another way through eventually." Astrid nodded, knowing he was right, though her body protested at the thought of further exertion. "There's an exit tunnel that leads to the valley. From there we can reach your fortress before nightfall." "You can see it?" Surprise colored his voice. "The stronghold?" "From the mountain pass." She stood, ignoring the sharp pain in her side. It appeared, suddenly, as though a veil had been lifted. Something shifted in Leif's expression, a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Our magic hides it from human eyes, yet you saw through the illusion." "I saw what was there." She shrugged, uncomfortable with the implication. "Nothing more." "Perhaps." His tone suggested he believed otherwise, but he let the matter drop. "Lead the way if you know it." The exit tunnel sloped gently upward, its walls smooth from centuries of spring floods. Unlike the mining shafts, this passage had been carved by water, not men. They walked in silence, conserving strength, each step bringing them closer to daylight. Astrid stole glances at her companion when she thought he wasn't looking. In the phosphorescent glow, Leif Blackthorn appeared more otherworldly than human, his features too sharp, his movements too fluid. The partial transformation she had witnessed in the cavern had revealed the truth beneath his human guise. He was something ancient, something powerful, and yet he bled. He felt pain. He loved his son with a ferocity that transcended species. "Your wounds need tending," she said, as they approached a bend in the tunnel where the first hints of natural light appeared. "The silver will poison your blood if left untreated." "I've survived worse." His voice was tight with controlled pain. "Not with 6 wounds you haven't." Astrid stopped walking, turned to face him fully. "I have wolf shield salve in my satchel. Let me help you." Leif paused, clearly weighing his options. Pride warred with practicality in his expression. Finally, he nodded once, a curt acceptance that spoke of a lifetime of difficult concessions. They found a small alcove off the main tunnel, sheltered and dry. Astrid instructed him to sit on a flat stone, then retrieved her medical supplies from the waterproof pouch in her satchel, a habit born from years of field medicine in unpredictable conditions. The worst wound was a deep stab in his shoulder, where silver residue had turned the surrounding flesh an unnatural gray. When she touched the area, Leif hissed, muscles tensing beneath her fingers. "This will hurt," she warned, uncorking the small vial of wolf shield, "but it will draw out the silver. Do what you must." Astrid applied the dark liquid to each wound, working with the methodical precision of a seasoned healer. Leif remained silent throughout, though she could feel tremors running through his body as the salve did its work. The only indication of his suffering was the tightness around his eyes and the white-knuckled grip he maintained on the stone beneath him. When she reached the last wound, a shallow cut across his ribs, his hand suddenly closed around her wrist, not forcefully but with unmistakable intent. "Where did you learn of wolf shield?" His golden eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "It is not common knowledge among humans. My grandmother taught me." Astrid met his gaze steadily, though something fluttered in her stomach at the contact. She was what the village called a wise woman, knew remedies most had forgotten. A wise woman. Leif's thumb moved slightly against the inside of her wrist, where her pulse beat strong and rapid. In older times, such women were often more than they appeared. She was just knowledgeable. Astrid withdrew her hand gently, returning to her task. Nothing more. But even as she spoke, memories surfaced. Her grandmother's strange predictions that always came true, plants that flourished at her touch when they should have withered, the way animals approached her without fear. Things Astrid had dismissed as coincidence or exaggeration now took on new significance in light of the world she had discovered existed alongside her own. "There." She finished bandaging the last wound with strips of clean linen from her satchel. "That should hold until we reach your healers." Leif flexed his shoulder experimentally, surprise registering on his face when the movement caused less pain than expected. "You have a gift." "Practice, not gift. 10 years as a field medic teaches efficiency, if nothing else." "You were a soldier?" Interest sharpened his gaze. "Not officially. Women weren't permitted in combat then." A wry smile touched her lips. "But when the fighting reached our borders, such distinctions became flexible." Leif nodded, understanding in his expression. "War has a way of revealing truth beneath convention." He rose, moving with greater ease than before. "We should continue. Fenrir will be worried." They emerged from this tunnel into late afternoon sunlight. The valley stretched before them, a mosaic of pine forest and meadows still partially covered in winter snow. In the distance, the fortress rose from the mountainside, more visible now than it had been from the pass, its towers and walls clearly defined against the sky. "Will your captain have reached it by now?" Astrid asked, shielding her eyes against the glare of sun on snow. "Bjorn knows these mountains as well as any born to them. He will have taken the most direct route." Leif's expression softened slightly. "Fenrir will be safe with him." They set a brisk pace across the valley floor, keeping to the shelter of the tree line where possible. Though the hunters had been temporarily thwarted, Astrid knew better than to assume they had abandoned the chase entirely. Men driven by zealotry rarely surrendered their quarry so easily. As they walked, Leif spoke of his people, the Veil Walkers, or shifters as they sometimes called themselves. Their history stretched back to the earliest human settlements in these mountains, when the boundaries between man and beast were less rigidly defined. "We were guardians once," he said, ducking beneath a low-hanging pine bough, "protectors of the balance between human and wilderness. The old tribes understood this, honored us with offerings and respect." "What changed?" Astrid asked. "New religions came. New fears." His face darkened. "Men who craved dominion over nature rather than partnership with it. They saw us as abominations, hunted us with silver and fire. The Silverbloods. Their earliest incarnation, yes. We retreated deeper into the mountains, built fortresses, learned to hide our nature." Leif gestured toward the distant stronghold. "For centuries we maintained an uneasy peace. They pretended not to see us. We pretended not to exist. But something's changed. Astrid remembered the increasing number of traps she'd found in the forest. They're growing bolder. Their numbers are swelling. New leadership, driven by old hatreds. He glanced at her. The trap that caught Fenrir, it bears the mark of Magnus Silverblood, their current leader, a man who believes his destiny is to eradicate my kind from the earth. The name sent a chill through Astrid that had nothing to do with her damp clothing. There had been something in the voice of the lead hunter in the cavern, a cold certainty that transcended mere hatred, the voice of a true believer. "Is that why you push Fenrir so hard?" she asked. "You fear what's coming." Pain flashed across Leif's features, quickly masked. "I fear what will happen to him if he's not prepared, if I fail him as I failed his mother." "What happened to her, to Sigrid?" Leif walked several paces in silence, his expression distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old grief. "She was ambushed while traveling to her ancestral grounds for the autumn ceremony. Hunters had discovered the location somehow." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I was dealing with a border dispute 50 miles away. By the time I felt her pain through our bond, reached her." He shook his head. "Fenrir was there. He saw everything." "I'm sorry," Astrid said softly, understanding now the roots of both Leif's protectiveness and Fenrir's rebellion. He was 4 years old, found him hiding beneath the wagon, covered in her blood. He didn't speak for 6 months after. Leif's jaw worked. "I swore then that I would make him strong enough that no one could ever hurt him like that again. And in trying to protect him, you pushed him away." Leif glanced at her sharply, golden eyes flashing with momentary anger. Then his shoulders slumped slightly. "Perhaps," he admitted, "I saw only the dangers awaiting him, forgot he was still a child who needed more than training and discipline." "It's not too late to change that," Astrid said. "He loves you. That was clear even when he stood against you. If we survive what's coming." Leif's expression hardened as he looked toward the fortress. "The Silverbloods will not stop with a few trappers in the forest. Magnus means to finish what his ancestors began." As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, they reached the edge of the cleared ground that surrounded the fortress. Close up, the structure was even more impressive. Massive walls of fitted stone rising seamlessly from the living rock of the mountainside. No mortar held the blocks together, yet not even a knife blade could be inserted between them. Guards patrolled the battlements, their forms shifting fluidly between human and partial wolf aspect as they moved. Banners snapped in the mountain wind, emblazoned with the symbol of a silver tree against black, the blackthorn sigil. The main gate stood open, unusual in such troubled times. As they approached, Astrid saw why. A welcoming party waited on the broad stone path, led by a massive red wolf that could only be Bjorn Ironwolf in his animal form. Beside him stood Fenrir, looking small but determined in borrowed clothes that were too large for his frame, and around them, arranged in what appeared to be a ceremonial formation, were 12 figures in elaborate robes of varying colors. "The council," Leif murmured, tension evident in his voice. "This is unexpected." "Is that bad?" Astrid asked, suddenly conscious of her bedraggled appearance and the dried blood staining her tunic. "It means they know what happened. About Fenrir's escape, the hunters, you." His eyes met hers briefly. "Be careful what you say. The council holds to ancient ways and older prejudices." Before she could ask what he meant, they were within earshot of the assembled group. Bjorn shifted forms with a fluid grace that still startled Astrid, despite all she had witnessed. One moment a great red wolf, the next a towering warrior with a single seeing eye. "My king," he inclined his head, "we feared the worst when you did not immediately follow." "It seems reports of my demise were premature," Leif replied dryly, then turned his attention to his son. "Fenrir, you're well?" The boy nodded, his golden eyes, so like his father's, moving between Leif and Astrid with undisguised curiosity. "Bjorn said you fought the hunters, that Astrid stayed to help you." "She did." Leif's voice softened slightly. "Her courage is remarkable." A tall woman stepped forward from the council members. Her silver hair was elaborately braided with bones and feathers, and her eyes, a startling violet, assessed Astrid with open suspicion. "So this is the human who harbored the heir." Her voice carried the weight of authority and age beyond her apparent years. "I am Thyra Moonfrost, head of the Blackthorn Council." "Astrid Vinter," she responded, meeting the woman's gaze directly despite her instinct to look away from those unnerving eyes. "You have involved yourself in matters beyond your understanding, Astrid Winter." Thyra's tone made it clear this was no compliment, brought danger to our doorstep by sheltering one of our kind. "The danger was already here," Astrid replied evenly. "The silverblood traps were in my forest long before Fenrir arrived." Murmurs rippled through the assembled council members at her words, some concerned, others clearly affronted by her directness. And yet, their leader now pursues not just the heir, but you as well. Thyra's violet eyes narrowed. "One wonders why a human would interest Magnus Silverblood so greatly." "Perhaps because she defied him," Leif interjected, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of a ruler. "Saved my son when she could have surrendered him, fought at my side when she could have fled." "Noble actions," Thyra conceded with evident reluctance, "or calculated ones." Fenrir stepped forward suddenly, placing himself between Astrid and the council. Despite his youth and small stature, something in his bearing commanded attention. "She saved my life," he said firmly, "tended my wounds, protected me from the hunters. If you question her loyalty, you question my judgment." A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Even Thyra seemed momentarily at a loss for words, clearly surprised by the boy's unexpected display of authority. Leif's expression shifted minutely, a flash of pride quickly masked by the gravity of the situation. "We can continue this discussion inside the fortress. Both Astrid and I require medical attention, and I suspect we all have much to report." Thyra inclined her head in reluctant acknowledgement. "The council chambers in 1 hour. We have matters of grave importance to discuss." Her violet eyes settled on Astrid once more. "The human will attend." As the council members turned and proceeded through the gates, Bjorn approached, concern evident in his gruff features. "Silver wounds?" he asked, nodding toward Leif's bandaged shoulder. "Treated for now. Astrid's knowledge of Wolf Shield saved me considerable pain." Bjorn's single eye widened slightly. "Wolf Shield is rare among our kind, much less humans. I'm finding our guest contains many surprises." Leif turned to Astrid. "Come, our healers will tend your wound properly, and you'll need suitable attire for the council meeting." As they passed through the massive gates, Astrid felt a subtle shift in the air, a tingling sensation across her skin that raised the fine hairs on her arms. Magic, she realized, ancient and powerful, woven into the very stones of this place. Inside, the fortress opened into a vast courtyard, bustling with activity. Shifters in various forms moved with purpose between buildings of fitted stone similar to the outer walls. Some carried weapons or supplies. Others trained in designated areas, their movements a blur of inhuman speed and precision. Children played near a central fountain, shifting effortlessly between human and wolf forms as they chased one another. Their laughter echoed against the stone walls, a bright counterpoint to the martial atmosphere that pervaded the rest of the fortress. Fenrir fell into step beside Astrid, his golden eyes watching her reaction to his home. "It's not what you expected, is it?" he asked quietly. "I'm not sure what I expected," she admitted. "But no, not this. It's so normal." A small smile touched his lips. "Despite what the Silverbloods believe, we don't spend our days howling at the moon and hunting humans." "I can see that." She studied the domesticity mixed with warrior preparation. Women hanging laundry while wearing swords at their hips, children learning combat forms alongside their letters. It's like any settlement preparing for war. "Because that's what we are." Fenrir's expression sobered. "Father says the peace has ended, that Magnus Silverblood won't stop until he's destroyed us all." Before Astrid could respond, they reached a large structure near the center of the fortress. Unlike the other buildings, this one bore elaborate carvings along its stone facade, wolves running beneath a crescent moon, warriors with spears standing alongside their animal counterparts. "The House of Healing," Leif explained, noting her interest in the carvings. "And residence of our lore keepers, the oldest building in the fortress, dating back to the first settlement." Inside, the air was warm and heavy with the scent of herbs, many familiar to Astrid from her own medicinal work, others strange and exotic. A woman approached, elderly but moving with the fluid grace that characterized all the shifters. Her eyes were a warm amber, her silver hair cropped short for practicality. "My king." She inclined her head to Leif, then to Fenrir. "Young heir, and..." Her amber gaze settled on Astrid with immediate interest. A human guest. How fascinating. "This is Astrid Vinter," Leif said. "She saved Fenrir from the Silverblood trap, treated his wounds with wolf shield salve." The healer's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Wolf shield? Truly?" She stepped closer, examining Astrid with new intensity. "Few of our own people remember that remedy. Where did you learn it?" "My grandmother." Astrid was beginning to tire of the question and the reactions it provoked. She was knowledgeable about traditional medicines. Was she indeed? The healer's tone suggested she suspected there was more to the story. "I am Freya Moonsinger, head healer of Blackthorn Fortress. Come, both of you need attention before the council meeting." She led them to separate treatment areas divided by woven screens. Fenrir remained with his father, while Astrid was guided to a small alcove containing a wooden examination table and various shelves of supplies. "Remove your tunic," Freya instructed matter-of-factly. "Let me see this wound." Astrid complied, wincing as dried blood pulled at the injury. The gash along her ribs was deeper than she'd initially thought. The silver blade had cut cleanly through skin and into the muscle beneath. Freya clicked her tongue in disapproval. "Silver wounds are dangerous, even to humans. The metal carries old magic, old poisons." Her fingers probed gently around the wound. "You're fortunate it didn't penetrate deeper." "Will it heal?" Astrid asked, suddenly concerned by the healer's grave expression. "With proper treatment." Freya selected several jars from the shelves, mixing their contents in a small stone bowl. "But it may leave a mark. Silver scars rarely fade completely." As the healer worked, applying a poultice that smelled of moonflowers and pine resin, Astrid's mind returned to the council's reception. Their suspicion had been expected. She was, after all, an outsider who had stumbled upon their most carefully guarded secret. But there had been something more in Thyra Moonfrost's reaction, something that felt personal. "The council seems wary of my presence," she said carefully. Freya's hands paused briefly in their work. "The council has reason to be cautious of strangers in these times, especially humans who see through our illusions." "Is that so unusual?" The healer secured a clean bandage over the poultice before responding. "There are 3 types of humans who can perceive our strongholds, child. Those with ancient bloodlines that once mingled with our own, those we specifically invite to see, and those who mean us harm, silverbloods whose hatred grants them a particular sight." A chill ran down Astrid's spine. "And which do they believe I am?" "That," Freya said, her amber eyes meeting Astrid's directly, "is what tonight's council meeting will determine." She handed Astrid a bundle of clean clothing. "These should fit. Traditional attire for a formal council appearance." The garments were finer than anything Astrid had worn since before the war. Soft wool dyed deep forest green, embroidered along the edges with silver thread and patterns reminiscent of the carvings outside. The cut was strange to her, more closely fitted than the loose tunics she was accustomed to, with intricate lacing along the sides. Once dressed, she emerged from the alcove to find Leif waiting alone. He too had changed, now wearing formal attire that marked his station more clearly, black wool with silver embroidery far more elaborate than her own, and a cloak clasped at the shoulder with a brooch bearing the blackthorn sigil. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her, something unreadable flashing across his features before he composed himself. "The clothes suit you," he said, voice carefully neutral. "They're beautiful, but unnecessary." Astrid felt strangely vulnerable in the fitted garments. "I'm not trying to impress the council. Nevertheless, appearance matters in formal proceedings, and these mark you as an honored guest, not a prisoner." He gestured toward the door. "Fenrir has gone ahead with Bjorn. We should join them." As they walked through the fortress, now cast in the golden light of sunset, Astrid felt eyes following their progress. Shifters paused in their activities to watch their king and the strange human woman in traditional dress. Some expressions were curious, others openly hostile. "What will happen at this council meeting?" she asked quietly. "They will question us, separately, most likely." Leif's voice was low, meant for her ears only. "They will want to know everything that transpired from the moment you found Fenrir, every word spoken, every action taken." "Why? What are they looking for?" "Inconsistencies, signs of deception." His golden eyes met hers briefly. "Or confirmation of what some already suspect." "Which is?" Leif didn't answer immediately. When he did, his words sent another chill through her, deeper than the first. That you are more than you appear to be, Astrid Winter, that your grandmother's knowledge was no coincidence, that your ability to see our stronghold, your possession of Wolf Shield, your uncanny talent for healing silver wounds." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "The Council believes you carry Veil Walker blood, diluted by generations perhaps, but present nonetheless." Astrid stared at him, disbelief warring with a strange sense of recognition, as though a puzzle piece had clicked into place, completing a picture she hadn't known she was assembling. "That's impossible," she said, but the words lacked conviction even to her own ears. "Is it?" Leaf studied her face with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "You saw our fortress when no ordinary human should. You knew a remedy lost to most of my own people. You survived a wound that would have killed many of my warriors. Coincidence, knowledge passed down, luck and proper treatment. Perhaps." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The Council will make its own determination. But know this, Astrid. If they decide you have our blood, everything changes." "What do you mean?" "Among our kind, bloodlines are sacred. Even the most distant relation is acknowledged, honored." His expression grew serious once more. "It would make you one of us, subject to our protection and our laws." Before she could ask what those laws might entail, they arrived at the council chambers, a circular building with a domed roof located at the highest point within the fortress walls. Guards stood at attention on either side of the massive wooden doors, their expressions stoic as they opened the way for their king. Inside, the chamber was lit by dozens of iron braziers, casting flickering shadows across the circular stone floor. 13 chairs formed a perfect ring, with one larger than the others, clearly the king's seat. 12 council members already occupied their positions, with Thyra Moonfrost seated directly opposite the king's chair. In the center of the circle stood a small stone dais, currently empty. Fenrir sat to the right of his father's chair, his young face solemn in the firelight. The room fell silent as Leif and Astrid entered. All eyes turned to them, expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Thyra's violet gaze was particularly penetrating, seeming to look through Astrid rather than at her. "King Blackthorn," she intoned formally, "we welcome your return to the fortress, and your guest." The slight pause before the last word spoke volumes about her feelings on the matter. Leif inclined his head in acknowledgement, then guided Astrid to a small bench near Fenrir before taking his own seat. The arrangement placed Astrid just outside the circle, neither fully included nor completely excluded from the proceedings. "We have grave matters to discuss," Thyra continued once Leif was seated. "The heir's disappearance, the Silverblood incursion, and the question of the human who sees through our veils." "And the broader threat from Magnus Silverblood," Leif added, his voice carrying the weight of command even in this formal setting. "Fenrir's encounter was no isolated incident. The traps throughout our territories are increasing. Their hunters grow bolder. All the more reason to question the convenient appearance of this human," said an elderly man seated to Thyra's right. His white beard was braided with silver beads, and his eyes, a deep forest green, regarded Astrid with undisguised suspicion. "Thorvald speaks what many think," Thyra said. "The timing is concerning." "The timing was fortunate for my son," Leif countered, a hint of steel entering his voice. "Without Astrid Winter's intervention, Fenrir would have died in that trap, or worse, been captured by the Silverbloods for questioning." "No one disputes the service rendered," Thyra replied smoothly. "Only questions why a human would risk herself for one of our kind, and how she came to possess knowledge that has been kept secret for centuries." "I think," said a new voice, soft but commanding attention nonetheless, "we should hear from the human herself." All eyes turned to the speaker, a woman seated several places from Thyra. Unlike the others, her robes were a deep midnight blue rather than the various earth tones worn by her counterparts. Her face was ageless, neither young nor old, and her eyes were the color of rain clouds just before a storm. "Wise counsel as always, Runa Stormcaller," Thyra said, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "Astrid Winter, you will stand upon the dais and answer our questions. Know that falsehood is futile here. The stones themselves will reveal deception." Astrid rose, feeling the weight of every gaze as she approached the small stone platform in the center of the circle. As her feet touched the ancient rock, a subtle vibration ran through her body, similar to the sensation she had felt passing through the fortress gates, but more focused, more intent. Magic, she thought again, old and watchful. State your name and lineage, Thyra commanded once Astrid had taken her place. Astrid Winter, daughter of Eric Winter and Ingrid Selving, granddaughter of Hilda Selving. She paused, then added, widow of Tormund Winter, fallen at Battered Ridge. A murmur ran through the council at the mention of the battle. Battered Ridge had been a turning point in the war, a devastating loss for the Northern Territories. You found the heir in wolf form, trapped by Silverblood hunters, Thyra continued. What made you approach rather than flee, as most humans would? It was injured, in pain. Astrid met the woman's violet gaze steadily. I've never been able to walk away from suffering I could ease, even at risk to yourself. I didn't consider the risk at the time. This wasn't entirely true. She had recognized the danger of approaching a wolf, injured or not, but she had done it anyway. The stone beneath her feet warmed slightly, as though in response to the half-truth. Astrid's heart rate increased, remembering Thyra's warning about the stones revealing deception. You treated the heir's wounds with wolf shield, Thyra pressed. A remedy known only to our kind and a handful of human allies throughout history. How did you come to possess such knowledge? My grandmother taught me. She was a healer in the old tradition, passed down remedies that had been in our family for generations. Your grandmother's name again? Hilda Selving. Runa Stormcaller leaned forward slightly, her storm-gray eyes intent. And where was your grandmother born, Astrid Winter? The question seemed odd after the more direct interrogation, but something in Runa's tone suggested it held greater significance than appeared on the surface. In the northern valleys, a small settlement called Ravenmist that was destroyed in the early conflicts. She was one of the few survivors. Another murmur ran through the council, more urgent this time. Thyra and Runa exchanged a glance laden with meaning. Ravenmist, Thyra repeated, her violet eyes narrowing. A settlement known for its mixed bloodlines, human and Vale Walker, living together before the Great Separation. The implications of her words hung in the air like smoke. Astrid felt a strange lightness in her head, as though pieces of herself she had never questioned were suddenly rearranging into a new configuration. Are you suggesting my grandmother was— We suggest nothing yet, Thyra interrupted, but circumstances compel us to investigate further. She turned to Leif. My king, with your permission, the council requests the blood recognition ritual. Leif's expression darkened. That ritual has not been performed in a century, Thyra. Its risks are considerable. As are the risks of harboring a human who may have claims to our bloodlines without confirming those claims. Thyra's voice hardened. These are dangerous times. We cannot afford uncertainty. The choice should be hers. Leif turned to Astrid, his golden eyes communicating a warning she couldn't fully interpret. The ritual will determine whether you carry Vale Walker blood, but it is not without danger. The magic involved is ancient and unpredictable. What kind of danger? Astrid asked, suddenly wary. It was Runa who answered, her voice gentler than Thyra's but no less serious. If you carry our blood, even diluted through generations, the ritual will awaken it, bring it to the surface. This can be painful, disorienting. And if I don't? A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Finally, Thorvald spoke, his aged voice cutting through the tension. Then the magic finds nothing to awaken, nothing to grasp. His green eyes held no comfort. In such cases, the seeker's life force itself may be consumed in the searching. You're saying it could kill me? Astrid's voice sounded distant to her own ears. It is a possibility, Thyra acknowledged, though remote if the evidence already before us is indicative. And if I refuse? Then you will be escorted beyond our territories with a vow of silence. Thyra's violet eyes glittered in the firelight. Your memories of this place, of the air, of all you have witnessed, will be adjusted. You would take my memories? Astrid felt a flare of anger at the violation implied in those words. Only those pertaining to our kind, Runa clarified. You would remember saving a wolf, but not its transformation. Remember a journey through the mountains, but not this fortress. And my alternative is to risk death in this ritual of yours. Astrid looked from face to face around the circle, searching for any sign of compassion or understanding. Most expressions remained impassive, though she noted Runa's held a hint of sympathy. Her eyes fell on Fenrir, who watched with undisguised concern, the boy who had trusted her when he was most vulnerable, who had led her to safety when the hunters came. Finally, she looked to Leif. The king's face revealed little, but something in his golden eyes spoke of conflict, of difficult choices made and regretted. If I have this blood you speak of, she asked slowly. "What then? What changes?" "Everything," Thyra said simply. "You would be acknowledged as kin, distant though the connection might be, subject to our protection and our laws." The same words Leaf had used, with the same ominous undertone. "Which laws in particular concern you?" Astrid pressed, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Thyra and Leaf exchanged a glance charged with meaning. It was the king who finally answered. "Among our kind, those with shared blood recognition are bound by sacred obligation to defend one another, to answer when called." His voice was carefully neutral. "And in times of great need, to stand with their kin against common enemies." Understanding dawned. "You want a soldier, another fighter in your war against the Silverbloods." "We want the truth of your lineage," Thyra countered. "The obligations that follow are as old as our kind, not matters of want, but of ancient law." Astrid stood silent for a long moment, weighing impossible choices. Return to a life half empty, with memories stolen and altered, or risk death to confirm a heritage she had never suspected, binding herself to obligations she hadn't chosen. Yet even as she considered, she knew her decision had been made the moment she freed a golden wolf pup from a silver trap, had been sealed when she fought beside Leif against the hunters. Some paths, once begun, could not be abandoned halfway. "I will undergo your ritual," she said finally. "If I have this blood you speak of, I deserve to know. And if not—" She straightened her spine, meeting Thyra's gaze directly. "Then at least I face my end with eyes open." A ripple of what might have been respect moved through the council. Even Thyra inclined her head slightly in acknowledgement of her courage. "It will be prepared," she said. 3 days hence, when the moon is dark. The absence of its light will make your blood's true nature easier to discern." "Until then," Leif interjected, his voice reclaiming the authority of his position, "Astrid Vinter is my honored guest. She will be afforded every courtesy and protection." "As you command, my king." Thyra's tone made it clear she considered the matter temporarily settled, not resolved. "Now, we must address the more immediate threat. Magnus Silverblood moves against us more boldly than any leader in generations. Our scouts report increased activity at all their known strongholds." The council meeting continued, shifting to matters of defense and strategy. Maps were brought forth, reports delivered by various military leaders. Astrid remained on the dais, somewhat forgotten as the discussion turned to fortifications and patrol schedules. Her mind, however, was elsewhere, grappling with revelations that threatened to upend everything she had believed about herself. If what they suggested was true, if her grandmother had indeed carried Vale Walker blood, what did that make her? And what would she become if this ritual awakened that dormant heritage? Across the circle of council members, Leif's golden eyes met hers briefly, communicating something she couldn't quite decipher. Concern, certainly, but also a strange anticipation, as though he saw possibilities that remained hidden to her. In 3 days, beneath a moonless sky, she would discover the truth or die in the seeking. Either way, Astrid knew with bone-deep certainty that she would never again be the woman who had ventured into a snowstorm seeking herbs for fever. That woman had died the moment she knelt beside a golden wolf pup caught in a silver trap. What would rise in her place remained to be seen. Astrid woke to sunlight streaming through tall windows, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. Gone was her rustic cabin with its low ceiling and smoke-stained beams. Instead, she found herself in a spacious chamber, lying on a bed larger than any she had known, covered with furs finer than a village healer could ever afford. Memory returned with the dull ache in her side where the silver blade had cut. The council, the fortress, the blood recognition ritual that awaited her in 3 days' time. She sat up carefully, testing the wound. Freya Moonsinger's treatment had worked well. The pain had subsided to a manageable throb, and when she lifted her sleeping tunic to examine the bandage, no fresh blood had seeped through. A soft knock sounded at the door. "Enter!" she called, hastily adjusting her clothing. A young woman appeared, carrying a tray laden with food. She was clearly one of the Vale Walkers, her movements too fluid for ordinary human grace, her eyes a striking amber that marked her heritage. Yet unlike the council members, she showed no suspicion or hostility toward Astrid. Only curiosity. "Good morning," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the windows. "I'm Eyre. The king asked me to attend to you during your stay." "Thank you, Eyre." Astrid moved to the table, suddenly aware of her hunger. The tray contained fresh bread, cheese, sliced meats, and berries preserved from the autumn harvest. Simple fare, but more plentiful than her usual winter meals. "This is generous. You'll need your strength." Air's amber eyes flickered briefly to Astrid's bandaged side. "For the ritual." The young woman's tone suggested she knew exactly what that entailed. Astrid paused, a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. "Have you seen this ritual before?" Air hesitated, then nodded once. "Once, when I was a child, a traveler from the eastern forests." She trailed off, her expression growing troubled. "It is not performed often." "And the traveler? Did they survive?" "Yes, she awakened to her bloodline." Air busied herself straightening items on the tray, avoiding Astrid's gaze. "But she was never the same after. The old blood changes you when it rises." A chill settled in Astrid's stomach despite the warm bread. "Changes how?" "It's different for everyone. Some gain new strengths, others lose old certainties." Air finally looked up, her expression softening. "But that's for those who carry our blood. Your situation may be entirely different." Or fatal, Astrid thought, but kept the grim observation to herself. "Is there anything I can do to prepare?" she asked instead. "Any way to improve my chances?" "Rest. Heal. And—" Air hesitated again. "Some say those with open hearts fare better. Those who don't resist what they might become." Before Astrid could ask what that meant, another knock interrupted them. Heavier, more authoritative than Air's gentle tap. The young woman straightened immediately, her manner shifting from conversational to deferential. "Enter!" Astrid called. Leif Blackthorn filled the doorway, his imposing frame making the chamber seem suddenly smaller. He wore simpler clothing than during the council meeting, a dark tunic belted at the waist, leather trousers, boots worn from use rather than ceremony. His golden eyes took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. "I see Air has brought your breakfast." His deep voice carried a warmth absent from their earlier interactions. "I trust the accommodations are satisfactory." "More than satisfactory." Astrid gestured to the chamber's elegant appointments. "Far grander than I'm accustomed to. These are the eastern quarters, reserved for honored guests." A faint smile touched his lips. "Though we have few visitors these days." Air bowed slightly to her king. "Will there be anything else, my lord?" "No, thank you, Air." The young woman nodded and slipped from the room, closing the door quietly behind her. Astrid found herself suddenly aware of being alone with Leif in a manner far more intimate than their journey through the wilderness. There, survival had dictated their interactions. Here, in this sunlit chamber, with its comfortable furnishings, other considerations came to the fore. "How is your wound?" Leif asked, remaining near the door rather than approaching further. "Healing well. Your healer knows her craft." "Freya is the best we have." He seemed to debate something internally, then continued. "Fenrir has asked to see you. He's concerned about the council's decision. I'd like to see him too." Astrid found herself smiling at the thought of the boy. Despite their brief acquaintance, she felt a connection to the young heir that transcended simple caretaking. "He's a remarkable child." "Yes." Something softened in Leif's expression. "More so than I've allowed myself to recognize, perhaps." "Have you spoken with him since our return?" Leif nodded, his gaze shifting to the window where morning light illuminated the fortress grounds below. "We talked long into the night. For the first time in years, I listened more than I commanded." A rueful smile touched his lips. "It seems I have much to learn about being a father." "All parents do," Astrid said gently. "My father was a military man, believed discipline was the highest virtue, preparation the surest defense against life's cruelties. It took me years to understand he acted out of love, not coldness." "And did you forgive him for his methods?" "Eventually, when I was old enough to see the fear behind his strictness." She met Leif's golden gaze directly. "The fear that must keep you awake at night as well. The fear of failing those you're sworn to protect." Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or surprise at being so easily read. He moved further into the room, stopping at the edge of the table where her breakfast lay half-eaten. "The council has been in session since dawn," he said, changing the subject, "discussing the Silverblood threat, and you." "Me?" Astrid raised an eyebrow. "I would have thought Magnus Silverblood's army would command more attention than one human woman. The two matters are not unrelated in their minds." Leif's expression grew serious. If you carry our blood, it changes the calculations, strengthens certain factions, weakens others. Politics! Astrid didn't bother hiding her distaste. Even among wolves. Especially among wolves. A sardonic smile crossed his features. We have had centuries to refine our power struggles, our ancient grudges. The council members you met represent lineages that have competed for influence since before your ancestors learned to forge iron. And where do you stand in these struggles? Above them, when possible. He ran a hand through his dark hair, streaked with silver at the temples. Between them, when necessary. The Blackthorn line has ruled for 10 generations because we maintain balance among the older bloodlines. A precarious position. Indeed. He studied her with new interest. You understand political realities better than most humans I've encountered. I've seen enough war councils to recognize the pattern. Astrid set down the bread she had been absently holding. But I fail to see how my existence affects your council's balance. Leaf seemed to consider how much to reveal. Finally, he settled into the chair opposite her, closing the distance between them to an intimate conversation rather than a formal exchange. There are 2 primary factions within the council, he explained, voice lowered though no one else was present to hear. Traditionalists, led by Thyra Moonfrost, who believe our future lies in isolation and secrecy, and progressives, championed by Runa Stormcaller, who advocate for selective alliances with humans who might understand our nature. And you? I have maintained neutrality, supporting neither faction exclusively. His golden eyes held hers. A king cannot afford the luxury of ideology when his people's survival is at stake. But now? But now a human woman has appeared who may carry our blood, who saved my son and fought at my side. His expression revealed nothing, yet Astrid sensed the weight of his words. If the ritual confirms what many suspect, you become a powerful symbol for Runa's faction, living proof that cooperation between our kinds is not only possible, but potentially advantageous. And if I die in the attempt? Then Thyra's position is strengthened, her warnings about human involvement vindicated. The clinical assessment of her possible death sent a chill through Astrid. So my survival has political value to you. Your survival has value beyond politics. For the first time, something raw and genuine broke through Leaf's careful composure. You saved my son when you had no obligation to do so, fought beside me when you could have fled. Those debts transcend council machinations. Before she could respond, another knock sounded at the door, lighter, more hesitant than either of the previous interruptions. Enter, Leaf called, his tone softening as though he already knew the visitor's identity. The door opened slowly to reveal Fenrir, dressed in clothing that finally fit his slender frame, dark trousers and a deep blue tunic embroidered with subtle silver patterns at the collar and cuffs. His golden eyes, so like his father's, darted between the 2 adults with barely concealed anxiety. Father, Astrid, he hovered at the threshold. Am I interrupting? Not at all. Astrid smiled, genuinely pleased to see him. Come in. The boy entered, closing the door carefully behind him. Though he appeared more rested than when they had arrived at the fortress, shadows still lingered beneath his eyes. Healing wounds, both physical and emotional, took time, something Astrid understood all too well. Eir told me you were awake, he said, approaching the table with the cautious grace that seemed innate to his kind. I wanted to see you before your preparations begin. Preparations? Astrid glanced at Leaf, who had risen from his chair. For the ritual, Leaf explained, there are traditional observances, purification rites. Runa will explain them to you later today. Fenrir moved closer to Astrid, his young face solemn. I asked Father if there was another way, if they could accept you without the ritual. His voice dropped to a near whisper. It's dangerous. I know. She reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. But sometimes the path forward requires courage rather than caution. Like freeing a wolf from a silver trap? A hint of his old spirit surfaced in the question. Exactly like that. Leaf watched their exchange with an unreadable expression. I have council matters to attend to, he said finally. Fenrir, perhaps you could show Astrid the fortress grounds when she's finished her meal. The eastern gardens might be particularly informative. Something passed between father and son, a message beyond the simple suggestion. Fenrir nodded, understanding apparently without need for further explanation. I'd like that, Astrid said, looking between them curiously. Until later, then. Leif inclined his head in a gesture more personal than formal, then departed, leaving Astrid alone with the heir to the Blackthorn throne. Fenrir settled into the chair his father had vacated, his posture relaxing slightly now that they were alone. "You should eat more," he said, gesturing to her half-finished meal. "The ritual requires strength." "So I've been told." Astrid took another piece of bread, more to humor him than from appetite. "Your father suggested the Eastern Gardens. Is there something special about them?" A secretive smile, the first truly childlike expression she had seen from him, crossed Fenrir's face. "They're my mother's gardens. She created them before I was born. Father has maintained them exactly as she left them." "That must be comforting for you, having a place that connects you to her." "It is." His golden eyes took on a distant quality. "I don't remember her clearly, just impressions. The scent of her hair, the sound of her laugh." He refocused on Astrid. "But in the gardens, sometimes it feels like she's still there, watching over things." Astrid felt a pang of empathy for this child who had lost his mother so young. She too had lost her parents early, her mother to illness when she was 6, her father to war when she was 15. Those absences shaped a person, carved hollows that could never quite be filled. "I'd be honored to see your mother's gardens," she said softly. They finished their meal in companionable silence, then made their way through the fortress. Unlike the previous evening, when Astrid had been too overwhelmed by the council meeting to fully register her surroundings, she now observed the inner workings of the Veilwalker stronghold with keen interest. The architecture blended seamlessly with the mountain itself, utilizing natural rock formations where possible. Corridors opened unexpectedly into airy chambers with soaring ceilings. Windows were positioned to capture maximum light without sacrificing defensibility. Throughout, she noted subtle carvings in the stone, wolves running, hunting, resting beneath trees, humans and wolves standing side by side in battle formations. The history of these people, written in images that required no words. Fenrir proved an eager guide, pointing out details she might have missed. "This is the Great Hall," he explained, as they passed an enormous chamber where long tables stood ready for the evening meal. "We gather here for important ceremonies and celebrations." "It's magnificent," Astrid said, genuinely impressed by the space with its high ceiling, supported by massive timber beams carved into the likeness of ancient trees. "Mother used to say it was built to remind us of our dual nature." Fenrir pointed to the ceiling. "Wood and stone, forest and mountain, human and wolf." They continued through various courtyards and practice grounds where Veilwalkers trained in both human and wolf forms, their movements a mesmerizing blend of martial precision and wild grace. Several nodded respectfully to Fenrir, though Astrid noted the guarded looks cast her way. Word of the upcoming ritual had clearly spread throughout the fortress. Finally, they reached a stone archway covered in flowering vines, impossible blooms given the winter season, yet thriving nonetheless. Beyond lay the Eastern Gardens, and Astrid drew in a sharp breath as they entered. Unlike the regimented growing plots she had expected, the space before them was a harmonious wilderness. Stone pathways wound between stands of evergreens and winter-blooming flowers she had never seen before. A small stream bubbled through the center, its water steaming slightly in the cold air, heated from some underground source. Birds called from the trees, their songs a sharp contrast to the winter silence beyond the fortress walls. "It's beautiful," Astrid said, turning slowly to take in the full panorama. "How is this possible in winter?" "Mother was a botanist before she met Father." Pride colored Fenrir's voice. "She developed methods to extend growing seasons, created hybrids that could withstand mountain winters." He led Astrid deeper into the gardens, pointing out particularly unique specimens. "This one only blooms under the full moon, and these," he indicated a cluster of silvery blue flowers, "are wolfsbane variants she cultivated for healing rather than harm." As they followed the winding path, the garden opened into a small clearing where a stone bench sat beside a reflecting pool. Above the bench hung a simple carving, a female wolf with stars caught in her fur. Sigrid's memorial, Astrid realized. Fenrir approached it with reverence, reaching up to touch the carving gently. "Father comes here every day at dawn," he said softly. "No matter what's happening in the fortress or beyond, even when he's angry with me, he never misses a day." Astrid remained silent, understanding this was a private grief she had been privileged to witness. After a moment, Fenrir turned back to her, his expression more vulnerable than she had yet seen. "The council thinks you might be like us," he said, "that your grandmother might have been a veil walker. So they believe. What do you think?" Astrid considered the question carefully. "I think my grandmother was different, special in ways I never fully understood." She moved to the bench, sat down carefully to avoid straining her wound. "She knew things others didn't, could do things others couldn't, but I never imagined that she might not have been fully human." Fenrir settled beside her, his smaller frame barely taking up a third of the stone seat. "Would it bother you, if it were true? It would explain much." Astrid found herself smiling slightly at the thought. "My father always said I had her stubborn nature, her affinity for wild things." She glanced at the boy. "But it would mean everything I believed about myself was incomplete." "Not incomplete." Fenrir's golden eyes held a wisdom beyond his years, just waiting to be fully known. Before she could respond, movement at the garden entrance caught her attention. Runa Stormcaller stood beneath the flowering archway, her midnight blue robe standing out against the greenery like a slice of night sky fallen to earth. Her storm-gray eyes found them immediately. "Young heir," she acknowledged Fenrir with a respectful nod. "I must borrow your companion for a time. The preparations cannot wait." Fenrir tensed slightly but nodded. "I understand." He turned to Astrid. "Will I see you before—" "I hope so." She squeezed his hand, offering reassurance she herself didn't entirely feel. "Thank you for showing me your mother's gardens. They're as remarkable as she must have been." A small smile touched his lips before he slipped away, passing Runa with a formal bow that reminded Astrid of his royal status, something easily forgotten in their private conversations. When they were alone, Runa approached, her movements flowing like water over stone. "The boy has grown attached to you," she observed, her voice neither approving nor condemning. "As has his father, though Leif would be loath to admit it." Astrid felt a flush of warmth at the words, but kept her expression neutral. "They've both suffered. Loss creates bonds between survivors." "Indeed." Runa gestured to the path leading deeper into the gardens. "Walk with me. There are things you must understand before tomorrow night's preparations begin." They followed a new path, this one leading upward toward the mountain face that formed the fortress's eastern boundary. The vegetation grew wilder here, less tended but no less beautiful for its natural state. "The blood recognition ritual dates to our earliest days," Runa explained as they walked. "Before the Great Migration to these mountains, before the wars that drove us into hiding." "How old is earliest days?" Astrid asked, curiosity momentarily displacing her anxiety about what lay ahead. "By human reckoning?" Runa's lips curved in a slight smile. "Perhaps 5,000 years? When your ancestors were still learning to forge bronze, mine were already codifying the magic that flows in our veins." The casual reference to such ancient lineage momentarily stunned Astrid. The history she had studied spoke of civilizations 4,000 years past as the dawn of time, yet here walked a woman who traced her heritage beyond even that distant threshold. "The ritual was originally used to confirm kinship between scattered clans," Runa continued, "to prevent warfare between those who shared the same primal bloodlines. Later, as humans and veil walkers began to intermingle, it served to identify mixed offspring who might not manifest shifting abilities naturally. And now? Now, it is rarely performed. The bloodlines have diverged too far in most cases. The magic cannot find purchase in diluted heritage." They reached a small clearing where a natural spring bubbled from the rock face. "Yet in your case, there are indications that recognition might be possible. My ability to see the fortress, that, and your knowledge of Wolfshield, and something more subtle, a resonance Freya detected when treating your wound." Runa knelt beside the spring, cupping her hands to collect water. "Silver hurts our kind because it disrupts the flow of magic within us. Yet your wound, while painful, is healing with unusual speed, as though something in your blood recognizes the threat and marshals defenses against it." She offered her cupped hands to Astrid. "Drink. This spring is sacred to our people. Its waters help prepare the body for ritual magic." Astrid hesitated only briefly before leaning down to sip from Runa's hands. The water tasted of minerals and something else, a faint sweetness that lingered on the tongue. An immediate warmth spread through her, centered around her wounded side. 3 nights from now, Runa said, watching her closely, when the moon is dark, you will enter the sanctum beneath the fortress. There, the elders will invoke the old magic, seeking evidence of Veilwalker blood in your veins. And if they find it, then the dormant heritage will awaken. The sleeping wolf will rise. Runa's storm-gray eyes held Astrid's gaze steadily. It can be overwhelming. Many resist the change when it begins, fight against what they are becoming. Like Air mentioned, those with open hearts fare better. Air is wise beyond her years. Runa nodded approval. The key to survival is acceptance, surrender to the transformation rather than struggling against it. A shadow crossed her ageless features. Those who fight the awakening rarely survive. The magic consumes them from within. And if there is no blood to awaken, if you're all wrong about me? Runa's expression grew solemn. Then the ritual will find nothing. Like water poured onto stone, it will seek cracks to penetrate and find none. She paused. In such cases, the searching itself can be dangerous. The magic is persistent. You mean it could kill me even trying to find something that isn't there? Yes. Runa made no attempt to soften the truth. Though I do not believe that will be your fate, Astrid Winter. Too many signs point to the contrary. They continued walking, moving now along the perimeter of the gardens, where wild forest began to reclaim the space. Astrid absorbed what she had been told, weighing risks against uncertainties, fears against hopes. There are preparations, Runa said after allowing her time to reflect. Rituals of purification, fasting, meditation to prepare the mind and spirit. She glanced at Astrid. And there is a decision you must make, should the awakening occur. What decision? Whether to complete the transformation or remain in the liminal state. Seeing Astrid's confusion, she elaborated. Full-blooded Veilwalkers can shift between human and wolf forms at will. Those with mixed heritage who undergo awakening gain certain abilities, enhanced senses, accelerated healing, extended lifespans, but typically cannot fully shift. Typically? There are exceptions. Rare individuals whose will and spirit are strong enough to force a complete transformation, despite diluted bloodlines. Runa stopped walking, turned to face Astrid directly. Such transformations are dangerous. Many die in the attempt. But those who succeed gain all the powers of true Veilwalkers, including the ability to become a wolf. Yes, Astrid considered this new information. Why tell me this now, before we even know if I carry the blood at all? Because intention matters in magic. Runa's voice took on a quality of formal instruction. What you believe possible shapes what becomes possible. If you enter the ritual expecting only partial awakening, that is likely all you will achieve, if you survive at all. And if I enter believing full transformation is possible, then you open pathways that might otherwise remain closed. Runa's storm-gray eyes seemed to look through Astrid rather than at her. The mind creates boundaries the blood does not recognize. They had circled back toward the entrance to the gardens. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the paths and plantings. In the distance, a horn sounded, some signal within the fortress routine that Astrid didn't yet understand. Tonight you will begin the purification, Runa said. A ceremonial bath with herbs and salts that prepare the body. Tomorrow, fasting begins. Water only, and specific teas I will provide. She studied Astrid with renewed intensity. Do you have questions? 1,000, Astrid thought, but only one that truly mattered. If I survive, if I awaken to this heritage, what becomes of me then? Do I remain here among your people, return to my life in the village, something else entirely? Runa's expression softened slightly. That depends on many factors, not least the outcome of the awakening itself. But know this, once recognized as kin, you can never fully return to your former life. The knowledge of what you are, of what we are, will color everything that follows. More political complications for Leif. Indeed. A knowing look entered Runa's eyes. Though I suspect the king's interest in your future extends beyond mere politics. Before Astrid could respond to this unexpected observation, Runa bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between equals rather than subordinate to superior. Rest now. I will send attendants at sunset to begin the preparations. She turned to go, then paused. One last thing, Astrid Winter, a warning or perhaps advice. Yes? Between now and the ritual, be wary of those who seek your confidence. Not all in the fortress wish for your successful awakening. Her storm-gray eyes held a clear warning. Thyra Moonfrost's faction would prefer a human remain merely human, or not remain at all. With that sobering caution, Runa departed, leaving Astrid alone in the fading afternoon light. She remained in the garden a while longer, finding solace in its wild beauty as she contemplated the path that lay before her. By the time she returned to her chambers, the sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the fortress grounds. She found her room changed, the bed now draped with white linens, the windows hung with sheer curtains that rippled in the mountain breeze. On the table where she had breakfasted sat a simple meal of bread and clear broth, her last sustenance before the fasting began. As promised, attendants arrived at sunset, 3 women of varying ages, all bearing the unmistakable golden eyes of true veil walkers. They spoke little, guiding her with gentle gestures rather than words. One carried a white robe of simple design. Another bore a wooden box containing various herbs and vials. The third, oldest of the 3, carried a small silver knife that made Astrid's skin prickle with wariness. They led her to a chamber deep within the fortress, a circular room dominated by a stone bath sunk into the floor. Steam rose from water that smelled of pine and something sweeter, more exotic. The walls bore carvings similar to those Astrid had seen throughout the fortress, but older, the lines worn smooth by centuries of moisture and touch. The ritual began with the cutting of a single lock of her hair, performed by the eldest attendant with the silver knife. The severed strands were placed in a small clay bowl, mixed with herbs, and set aflame. The resulting smoke filled the chamber with an aroma that made Astrid's head swim pleasantly, loosening the tight knot of anxiety that had formed in her chest. Next came the bath itself. The water, hotter than seemed natural, contained salts and oils that tingled against her skin. As she sank into its depths, the attendants began to sing in a language Astrid didn't recognize, something older than any human tongue she had encountered. The sound reverberated off the stone walls, creating harmonies that seemed to penetrate beyond hearing, vibrating in bone and blood. The youngest attendant washed her hair with a solution that smelled of moonflowers and wild sage. The middle one traced symbols on her shoulders and back with fingertips dipped in oil that left warmth in its wake. The eldest watched, directing with subtle gestures, her ancient eyes evaluating each step of the process. Throughout, Astrid maintained the calm acceptance Runa had advised. Whatever magic worked upon her now, she would not resist it, would not fight what might be her only path to survival. When the bathing ritual concluded, she was dried with soft linen cloths and dressed in the white robe, a garment free of adornment save for silver thread binding the hem and sleeves. Her damp hair was combed straight and left unbound to dry naturally. No ornaments, no shoes, nothing to come between her body and whatever energies the ritual might invoke. "Rest now," the eldest attendant said, the first words spoken since the ceremony began. "Tomorrow's preparations will be more demanding." They led her back to her chambers, now transformed into an austere space befitting her ritual status. All color had been removed: white bedding, white curtains, even white candles in place of the more traditional oil lamps. A single cup of steaming tea waited on the bedside table. "Drink before sleeping," the eldest instructed. "It will prepare your dreams for what comes." Then they were gone, leaving Astrid alone with her thoughts and the steadily deepening night beyond her windows. She approached the bed slowly, aware of a strange lightness in her limbs, as though the ritual bath had dissolved something heavy she hadn't realized she carried. The tea tasted of earth and mountain herbs, bitter at first sip, but leaving an unexpected sweetness as an afterthought. She drank it slowly, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Sleep came more easily than she had expected, pulling her down into dreams vivid beyond ordinary experience. She ran through forests she had never seen, alongside wolves she had never met, swam in cold mountain lakes beneath moons impossibly large and bright, hunted prey that changed form as she pursued it, rabbit to deer to human and back again. Through it all, a voice called from the periphery of awareness, familiar yet strange, comforting yet unsettling. She woke at dawn to find air waiting quietly beside her bed, a steaming cup in hand. This tea was different, clear as water, but carrying the sharp scent of pine and something metallic beneath. "The awakening tea," Air explained, offering the cup. "The first of 7 you will drink today." Astrid accepted it, noting the slight tremble in her own hands, aftermath of dreams too real to be merely symbolic. What was in last night's cup? The dreams were revealing, Air suggested with a small smile. Dream root and wolf's heart flower. They open pathways between conscious and unconscious mind, between human perception and other ways of seeing. The explanation made a strange sort of sense. Astrid drank the new tea, wincing at its bitter taste. Almost immediately, a tingling sensation spread through her body, centered around her wounded side. When she checked beneath the bandage, she found the silver cut nearly healed. Only a thin pink line remained where yesterday the wound had still been raw and angry. "The tea accelerates healing," Air explained, noticing her surprise. "Prepares the body for the strain of the ritual." The day passed in a blur of ritualized activities. Between the 7 cups of awakening tea, Astrid was guided through forms of meditation she had never encountered, exercises that required her to focus on specific parts of her body, imagining them transformed, then returned to human shape. At midday, Runa arrived to inspect her progress, nodding approval at the advanced healing of the silver wound. "Your blood responds strongly," she observed, "a promising sign." In the late afternoon, she was brought to a small chamber where Freya Moonsinger waited with a bowl of dark liquid. "Wolf blood," the healer explained, seeing Astrid's questioning look. "Freely given by members of the king's own pack. You will be marked with signs of kinship." The marking ritual was intimate and strange. Freya's wrinkled fingers dipping into the blood, tracing symbols across Astrid's forehead, throat, and over her heart. Each mark burned briefly, then cooled to a tingling awareness that lingered long after the visible blood was cleaned away. "These invoke the primal bonds of pack," Freya explained. "Call to any kindred blood that may flow in your veins." By sunset, Astrid felt simultaneously exhausted and more alert than she had ever been. Her senses seemed heightened, scents sharper, sounds clearer, even colors more vivid. The 7th cup of tea, taken as the last light faded from the sky, brought with it a profound clarity of mind that cut through her fatigue like a blade through water. She was escorted back to her chambers by Air, who had remained her most constant companion throughout the day's preparations. "Tomorrow you will rest," the young woman said as they reached Astrid's door. "Conserve your strength. The final preparations begin at sunset tomorrow, and the ritual itself at midnight." "Will I see anyone before then?" Astrid asked, suddenly reluctant to face the coming isolation. Ear hesitated. "It is traditional for candidates to remain in seclusion during the final day, but—" She glanced down the corridor as though checking for observers. "I believe the king intends to visit you briefly in the morning, and the heir has been most insistent about seeing you as well." A warmth that had nothing to do with ritual teas spread through Astrid's chest. "Thank you for telling me." "Rest well, Astrid Winter." Air smiled, a genuine expression that reached her amber eyes. "And remember, open heart, open mind. The path becomes clearer when we stop fighting against it." Alone in her white-draped chamber, Astrid moved to the window, gazing out at the night sky where stars burned like distant campfires. Somewhere beyond that darkness lay her old life, the cabin in the woods, the village in the valley, the simple existence of a healer living on society's edges. Already it seemed another lifetime, another self. Whatever emerged from tomorrow night's ritual, awakened veil walker or mere human-facing memory alteration, that former life was lost to her now. The path led forward only into unknown territories mapped by laws and traditions older than human civilization itself. She touched the spot over her heart where Freya had drawn the blood mark, now invisible to the eye, but still present to her heightened senses. Whatever ancient magic it invoked stirred something within her, a recognition beyond conscious understanding, a remembering of things never personally experienced, yet somehow intimately known. "Grandmother," she whispered to the night, "what secrets did you carry to your grave?" The stars offered no answer, but as she turned from the window, Astrid caught a glimpse of movement in the courtyard below. A massive wolf with silver-gold fur standing motionless, golden eyes fixed on her window. Leaf, in his true form, standing watch as she prepared to face her trial. She raised her hand in acknowledgement, and the great wolf inclined its head before melting into the shadows beyond the torchlight. Not gone, she sensed, simply unseen, waiting, as she was waiting, for whatever dawn would bring. Dawn light seeped beneath the white curtains, casting Astrid's chamber in a gentle glow that belied the significance of the day ahead. She had slept fitfully despite the ritual tea, her dreams filled with running, hunting, and transformations that left her disoriented upon waking. Her body felt different, taut with anticipation, her senses unnaturally sharp. She could hear conversations in distant corridors, smell the pine smoke from hearths throughout the fortress. Even the texture of the linen against her skin seemed more pronounced, each thread distinct beneath her fingertips. The preparations were working then, opening pathways between the human she had always been and whatever she might become after tonight's ritual. If she survived, that possibility, her death beneath the midnight moon, had remained an unspoken specter throughout the preparations. Neither Runa nor Freya had sugar-coated the risks, but neither had they dwelled on them. The ritual would proceed. Her blood would either awaken or it would not. Her fate had been sealed the moment she agreed to the council's terms. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts, gentler than Air's usual tap. Before she could respond, the door opened slightly, and Fenrir's golden eyes peered through the gap. "Are you awake?" he whispered, though from his expression she knew he could see her perfectly well in the dim light. "Come in," she said, sitting up and adjusting the white robe she had slept in. The boy slipped inside, closing the door silently behind him. He carried a small wooden box, holding it before him like an offering. "I'm not supposed to be here," he confided, approaching the bed with the natural grace of his kind. "Traditional seclusion and all that, but I wanted to see you before—" He trailed off, unwilling to name the ritual and its potential consequences. "I'm glad you came." Astrid smiled, genuinely warmed by his presence. "What's that you're carrying?" Fenrir placed the box on the bed beside her, his expression suddenly solemn beyond his years. "A gift. For luck." He opened the lid to reveal a bracelet of braided leather, adorned with a single silver charm, a wolf's head, intricately crafted, with tiny eyes of amber stone. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "Father gave it to her when they were bonded." Astrid stared at the bracelet, understanding the significance of such a personal offering. "Fenrir, I can't accept this. It's a family heirloom. That's why it has to be you." The boy's voice was firm despite its softness. "You saved me. Fought beside Father. You're already family, whether the ritual confirms your blood or not." The simple declaration caught her off guard, emotion tightening her throat. She had spent so many years alone, first as a widow, then as a healer living on society's edges. The concept of family had become abstract, a memory rather than a daily reality. Yet here stood this remarkable child, offering her connection with the same unhesitating courage he had shown in the mines. "Thank you," she managed, taking the box with careful hands. "I'll wear it tonight." Fenrir nodded, apparently satisfied. He sat at the foot of the bed, watching her with those uncanny golden eyes that held wisdom far beyond his years. "Father says the ritual is very old," he said, "from before our people came to these mountains." "So Runa mentioned." "He says—" The boy hesitated, then continued in a rush. "He says if anyone can survive it, you can." Something in his tone caught her attention. "Has your father performed this ritual before?" "No, but he's seen it." Fenrir's expression darkened. "When he was my age, his cousin, a half-blood from the eastern packs, underwent the recognition. Father never speaks of it, but Bjorn told me once that it didn't end well." Astrid absorbed this new information, understanding now some of the tension she had sensed in Leif whenever the ritual was discussed. Not just political concern or general wariness, but personal experience with its dangers. "I'll be careful," she promised. Though both knew survival had little to do with caution and everything to do with whatever ancient blood might or might not flow in her veins. Fenrir nodded, accepting the reassurance for what it was. Not a guarantee, but a commitment to fight rather than surrender. A comfortable silence fell between them. The fortress was waking around them, sounds of daily life filtering through the stone walls, voices calling greetings, the clang of practice weapons from the training grounds, the distant laughter of children. "What happens after?" Fenrir asked suddenly. "If the ritual works, if you awaken?" It was the same question she had asked Runa, and one she had been pondering through the night. "I don't know," she admitted. "My life as a village healer is over regardless. The Silverbloods have seen to that. You could stay here. The words tumbled out quickly, as though he had been holding them back. With us. Father would offer you a place. I know he would. Astrid smiled gently at the boy's earnestness. Let's see if I survive the night before making plans for tomorrow. Fenrir looked as though he might argue further, but instead nodded reluctantly. Just think about it. Before she could respond, another knock sounded, this one firmer, more authoritative. Fenrir's eyes widened in momentary alarm. That's Father, he whispered. I'm not supposed to be here. Enter, Astrid called, amused despite herself by the boy's sudden panic. The door opened to reveal Leif Blackthorn, dressed in simple dark clothing similar to what he had worn the previous day. His golden eyes took in the scene at a glance. His son perched at the foot of Astrid's bed, the open box between them. Fenrir. His tone held more resignation than anger. I might have known you'd disregard tradition. I just wanted to, the boy began defensively. Give her your mother's bracelet. Leif finished the sentence, surprising them both. Yes, I noticed it was missing from the memorial alcove this morning. His expression softened slightly. Your mother would approve, I think. Fenrir relaxed visibly at his father's words. So you're not angry? Not today. Leif's gaze shifted to Astrid, something unreadable in those golden depths. But now you must go. Astrid needs her rest, and Freya will be looking for you for your lessons. The boy sighed but obediently rose from the bed. I'll see you after the ritual, he said to Astrid, a statement of faith rather than a question. I'll look forward to it, she replied, unwilling to dampen his confidence with her own doubts. Fenrir moved to the door, pausing beside his father. Some unspoken communication passed between them, a touch on the shoulder, a meeting of golden eyes. Then the boy was gone, his footsteps fading down the corridor. Leif remained in the doorway, seemingly reluctant to enter fully, yet unwilling to leave. I apologize for the intrusion, he said finally. Candidates are traditionally left in solitude on the day of the ritual. I welcome the company. Astrid gestured to the chair near the window. Please. He hesitated, then closed the door and moved to the indicated seat. Morning light cast his features in sharp relief, the strong jaw, the proud nose, the silver threading through dark hair at his temples, a face carved by centuries of leadership and loss. You look different, he observed, studying her with those penetrating golden eyes. The preparations are having their effect. Astrid touched her throat where Freya's blood mark had been drawn. Though invisible, she could still feel it, a subtle warmth against her skin. My senses are heightened, dreams more vivid. Good signs. He nodded, though something in his expression remained guarded. The teas helped prepare the body for the strain of the ritual. So I've been told. She tilted her head, studying him in return. Fenrir mentioned you witnessed a recognition ritual once. Your cousin? Leif stiffened almost imperceptibly, surprise flashing across his features before his usual composed mask returned. He shouldn't have spoken of that. Children often speak of things adults wish to keep buried. Astrid's voice remained gentle, non-accusatory. It helps me to know, to understand what I face. For a moment, she thought he might refuse to elaborate. Then his shoulders dropped slightly, the rigid posture relaxing into something more vulnerable. Katya, he said, the name emerging with evident difficulty. My father's sister's daughter, half human. Her mother died in childbirth, and my aunt raised her among our pack. His gaze turned distant, focused on memories Astrid could not see. She was like a sister to me, brilliant, fearless, too fearless perhaps. What happened? When she came of age, she insisted on undergoing the recognition ritual, wanted to awaken whatever Veilwalker blood she carried. His jaw tightened. The council advised against it, said her bloodline was too diluted, the risk too great. But Katya was determined. Like someone else we know, Astrid said softly, thinking of Fenrir's stubborn courage. A ghost of a smile touched Leif's lips. Yes, that trait runs strong in our bloodline. The smile faded. The ritual began normally enough, the invocations, the sacred herbs, the ancient words, but when the recognition magic entered her blood, searching for kindred essence, he shook his head. It found too little to grasp, yet too much to release. She was caught between worlds, neither fully awakened nor fully human. She died, Astrid stated rather than asked. Not immediately. Pain shadowed his golden eyes. For 3 days she suffered, shifting partially, unable to complete the transformation or return to her human form. On the third night, her heart simply stopped. Silence fell between them, heavy with the weight of old grief and future possibility. Astrid absorbed the story, understanding now the source of Leif's concern whenever the ritual was discussed. Not just for her, but for the echo of past loss her situation evoked. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "about Katja. It was long ago, by human reckoning at least." His gaze returned to the present, focusing on her with renewed intensity. "But it is why I hesitated when Thyra proposed the ritual for you, why part of me still wishes you had chosen the other path, memory alteration and safe return to your human life." "Would that truly have been safer?" Astrid countered gently. "With Magnus Silverblood hunting me for helping Fenrir? With my home destroyed and my reputation in the village tainted by association with wolves? Perhaps not." A hint of grimness colored his tone. "The Silverbloods have long memories and little mercy for those who aid our kind. Then I chose the only path available to me." She straightened her shoulders, determination replacing doubt. "If I carry the blood I deserve to know, to be what I truly am, not what circumstance has limited me to." Leif studied her for a long moment, something like admiration kindling in his golden eyes. "You speak like one born to our kind," he said quietly. "The same fierce pride, the same unwillingness to live confined by others' fears." "Perhaps that's evidence itself of heritage." She smiled slightly. "Perhaps." He leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "Astrid, there is something you should know before tonight, something the council may not have fully explained." She tensed, sensing the weight of whatever revelation was coming. "Tell me." "The ritual creates bonds," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Not just the awakening of dormant blood, but connections to those who participate in the ceremony, the elders who invoke the magic, the witnesses who ground the energies." He paused. "And especially to any who contribute their blood to the ritual." Understanding dawned slowly. "You mean Freya's wolf blood markings, the blood that came from your pack?" "Yes." His golden gaze held hers steadily. "My blood, specifically. As king, it is traditional for me to provide the binding essence for any recognition ritual performed within our territory." "Binding," Astrid repeated, grasping the implication. "You mean it creates a permanent connection between us?" "A blood bond," he confirmed. "Not as deep as those between life mates or parent and child, but significant nonetheless. You would sense my emotions, as I would sense yours. Know my location, as I would know yours. In times of extreme danger or need, we could even share strength across distance." The revelation should have alarmed her. This unknown magic that would tie her to another being in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. Yet instead, she felt a strange calm settle over her, as though some part of her had been expecting this. "Why tell me this now, when the ritual is hours away?" "Because you deserve the choice." His voice lowered, intensity building in his golden eyes. "I can appoint another to provide the binding blood. Bjorn, perhaps, or one of the council elders. The connection would be weaker, but the ritual could still proceed." Astrid considered this offer, understanding it for the rare concession it was. Leif Blackthorn was not a man accustomed to ceding control or offering alternatives to tradition. Yet here he sat, providing her an escape from a magical bond that would link them irrevocably. "And if I choose to proceed as planned, with your blood as the binding element?" Something flickered in his expression, too complex to name, too quickly masked to interpret fully. "Then we face whatever comes together," he said simply, "bound by blood and obligation until death releases us." The words held ritual weight, formal and ancient. Yet beneath the formality, Astrid sensed something more personal, an offer extended beyond mere tradition or duty. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Without waiting for acknowledgement, Runa Stormcaller entered, her midnight blue robes replaced today with white garments similar to Astrid's own. Her storm-gray eyes took in the tableau with a single sweeping glance. Astrid on the bed, Leif leaning forward in the chair beside her. "My king," she said, inclining her head slightly, "I must begin the final preparations. The council gathers at sunset." Leif rose from the chair, his regal bearing reasserting itself in the presence of his advisor. "Of course." He turned back to Astrid. "Consider what I've said. There is still time to choose a different path." "I've made my choice," she replied. the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. "Your blood, your bond. Whatever comes, we face it together." Something sparked in his golden eyes, relief, perhaps, or satisfaction. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that carried more weight than words could have conveyed. "Until tonight, then." He moved toward the door, pausing briefly beside Runa. Some unspoken communication passed between them before he continued on, his footsteps fading down the corridor. When they were alone, Runa approached the bed, her ageless face revealing nothing of her thoughts regarding the exchange she had witnessed. "The final preparations begin now," she said, her voice neutral. "A second ritual bath, anointment with sacred oils, meditation to center your spirit before the trial." Astrid nodded, rising from the bed. As she did, her hand brushed Fenrir's gift, the box containing Sigurd's bracelet. She lifted it, examining the delicate wolf's head charm with its amber eyes. "This was a gift," she explained, seeing Runa's questioning look. "From the heir, Sigurd's bonding bracelet." Recognition flickered in the older woman's eyes. "A powerful talisman. You should wear it tonight." Something that might have been approval softened her expression. "The boy has good instincts. Old blood runs true in him." She gestured toward the door. "Come, much remains to be done before moonrise." The day passed in a blur of ritual and preparation. The second bath was more elaborate than the first, the water infused with rare herbs that left Astrid's skin tingling with sensitivity. Runa herself performed the anointment, tracing sacred symbols across Astrid's forehead, throat, and heart, with oil that smelled of moonflowers and pine. Throughout, Astrid maintained the calm acceptance she had been advised to cultivate. Whatever magic worked upon her body and spirit, she welcomed it without resistance. The path forward required surrender, not struggle. As sunset approached, she was led to a small meditation chamber deep within the fortress. No windows penetrated this room, its only illumination coming from white candles placed at the 4 cardinal directions. A simple mat of woven reeds covered the stone floor, and the air hung heavy with the scent of burning sage. "You will remain here until the midnight hour," Runa instructed. "Focus your thoughts on transformation, on the wolf that may sleep within your blood. Imagine it waking, stretching, rising to consciousness." Astrid settled onto the reed mat, arranging her white robe around her. Sigurd's bracelet encircled her wrist, the silver wolf's head cool against her skin. "When the time comes, you will be led to the sanctum beneath the fortress," Runa continued. "There, the council will perform the recognition ritual." Her storm-gray eyes held Astrid's gaze steadily. "Remember what I told you. Acceptance is key. Do not fight what awakens within you, no matter how strange or frightening it may seem." "I understand." Runa studied her for a moment longer, then nodded, apparently satisfied by what she saw. "May the old magic find you worthy, Astrid Vinter." With those words she departed, closing the heavy wooden door behind her. Alone in the candle-lit chamber, Astrid closed her eyes and surrendered to the meditative state she had been taught. Her breathing slowed, deepened. Her heightened senses, a product of the ritual teas and preparations, expanded further, reaching beyond the confines of her physical body. She could feel the fortress around her, the ancient stone vibrating with subtle energies, the movement of its inhabitants creating patterns she could almost see behind closed eyelids. Somewhere far above, Fenrir paced in his chambers, anxiety radiating from him like heat from a flame. In another part of the fortress, the council gathered, their combined power a pressure against her awareness. And closer, just beyond conscious reach, something stirred within her own blood, a presence both familiar and utterly foreign. The wolf that Runa claimed slept within her heritage, waiting to be recognized, to be awakened. Time lost meaning in the meditative trance. Astrid floated between moments, between breaths, between heartbeats. The candles burned lower, their flames casting longer shadows across the stone walls. Outside the chamber, the fortress settled into evening routines, meals taken, watches changed, children put to bed with stories of ancient heroes and forgotten magic. When the door finally opened, Astrid was ready. She opened her eyes to find Freya Moonsinger standing in the threshold, her aged face solemn in the dim light. "It is time," the healer said simply. Astrid rose in a single fluid movement, her body feeling strangely light despite the day's fasting. She followed Freya through torchlit corridors she had not seen before, descending steadily deeper into the mountain's heart. The air grew cooler with each level they descended, carrying the scent of earth and ancient stone. Finally, they reached a massive wooden door bound with iron, its surface carved with symbols similar to those that had been traced on Astrid's skin. 2 guards stood at attention on either side, wolves in their animal form, massive creatures with fur of midnight black. Freya placed her palm against the center of the door, murmuring words too low for Astrid to catch. The symbols flared briefly with blue light, and the door swung inward on silent hinges, revealing the sanctum beyond. The chamber was circular, its ceiling lost in shadows above. 7 stone pillars formed an inner circle, each carved to resemble a wolf in mid-transformation. Paw becoming hand, muzzle elongating into human face, spine straightening from quadruped to biped. Between the pillars stood members of the council, 12 in all, dressed in ceremonial robes of white. In the center of the circle lay a raised dais of black stone, its surface polished to mirror-like smoothness. Beside it stood Thyra Moonfrost and Runa Stormcaller, facing each other across the stone like representatives of opposing forces. And at the head of the circle, directly across from the entrance, stood Leaf Blackthorn. Unlike the council members, he wore clothing of deep crimson, the color of blood, of sacrifice. His golden eyes found Astrid immediately, holding her gaze as Freya led her into the chamber. "The candidate approaches," Thyra intoned, her voice echoing in the vast space. Human-born, yet carrying the ancient heritage, she comes seeking recognition, seeking awakening of what sleeps within her blood. "Let her enter the circle," Runa responded, completing what was clearly a traditional exchange. "Let her stand before the council and declare her intention." Freya guided Astrid to the edge of the inner circle, then stepped back, her role in the ceremony apparently complete. Astrid moved forward alone, stopping before the black stone dais at the chamber's center. "State your name and lineage," Thyra commanded. "Astrid Vinter," she responded, her voice steady despite the weight of ceremony and expectation. "Daughter of Eric Vinter and Ingrid Selving, granddaughter of Hilda Selving of Ravenmist." A murmur ran through the assembled council at the mention of Ravenmist, confirmation of the settlement's significance in Veilwalker history. "Why do you seek the recognition ritual?" Thyra continued, violet eyes intent on Astrid's face. "To know what flows in my veins, to awaken what sleeps within my blood, to become what I truly am, rather than what circumstance has limited me to be." The words came naturally, as though she had always known them. "The ritual carries risk," Runa warned, though her tone suggested this too was ceremonial rather than an actual caution. "Death for those whose blood proves false, transformation for those whose blood proves true. Neither path can be walked halfway." "I accept the risk," Astrid replied. "I choose the path of truth, whatever it may reveal." Thyra and Runa exchanged a glance across the dais, then nodded in unison. "The candidate is accepted," they declared together. At some unseen signal, the council members began a low chant in a language Astrid did not recognize, something older than any human tongue, its syllables resonating in bone and blood rather than ear and mind. The sound built slowly, filling the chamber with vibrations that made the very air seem to shimmer. "Disrobe," Runa instructed quietly. "Nothing must come between your flesh and the recognition stone." Astrid untied the silver cord that bound her white robe, letting the garment fall to the stone floor. Naked beneath the ceremonial gaze of the council, she felt strangely unself-conscious, as though her body were merely a vessel for whatever transformation might come, its exposure a necessary step rather than a vulnerability. "Lie upon the stone," Thyra directed, arms and legs extended, face toward the ceiling. The black stone felt unexpectedly warm against Astrid's skin as she positioned herself as instructed. Above, the shadows seemed to swirl with the council's chanting, forming patterns that her mind could almost, but not quite, decipher. Runa and Thyra moved to stand at her head and feet respectively, their hands raised toward the shadowed ceiling. The chanting grew louder, faster, its rhythm matching the increasingly rapid beat of Astrid's heart. Then Leaf stepped forward, approaching the dais from her right side. In his hand he held a small silver knife, similar to the one used in her preparatory rituals. Without hesitation, he drew the blade across his palm, opening a clean line that welled immediately with dark blood. "With my blood, I bind," he intoned, his deep voice cutting through the chanting without disrupting it. "With my essence I connect, with my power I awaken." He extended his bloodied hand over Astrid, letting 3 drops fall onto her forehead, directly over the invisible mark Freya had traced the day before. Each drop burned like fire against her skin, sending jolts of sensation through her entire body. The chanting reached a crescendo, the council members now swaying with its rhythm. Runa and Thyra began speaking in counterpoint, one voice rising while the other fell, creating harmonies that seemed to twist reality itself. Beneath Astrid, the black stone began to glow with a cold blue light that penetrated her flesh, sinking into muscle and bone. Pain flared along her spine, radiating outward through her limbs. Her vision blurred, then sharpened to preternatural clarity. She could see the energy patterns now, swirling currents of power flowing from the council members to the stone beneath her, from the stone into her body, from Leaf's blood into her very cells. Magic older than civilization itself, awakening something that had slept within her heritage for generations. The pain intensified, threatening to overwhelm her discipline. Her body arched involuntarily against the stone, muscles contracting as though attempting to reshape themselves. In that moment of crisis, Runa's warning echoed in her mind. Acceptance is key. Do not fight what awakens within you. With supreme effort, Astrid surrendered to the transformation. Instead of resisting the pain, she welcomed it, opening herself to the fire that raced through her veins, to the pressure that built within her bones. Something ancient stirred in response, a consciousness both familiar and utterly alien. The wolf within her blood, awakening after centuries of dormancy. She could feel it stretching, rising toward the surface of her awareness. The black stone beneath her now glowed white-hot, though it burned with cold rather than heat. The council's chant changed, becoming a series of sharp cries that matched the spasms racking her body. Through it all, Leaf remained at her side, his golden eyes never leaving her face, his bloodied hand now pressed directly over her heart. "Accept," he urged, his voice reaching her through the maelstrom of sensation and magic. "Become." Astrid's world contracted to a single point of awareness, the connection between Leaf's palm and her heart, where his blood mingled with the invisible mark Freya had drawn. Through that connection flowed not just magic, but memory, generations of shifting forms, of running beneath moon-drenched skies, of pack bonds stronger than death itself. With a final surge of power, the ritual reached its apex. Astrid felt something fundamental within her surrender, then reshape itself according to ancient patterns carried in her blood. Her vision went dark, then exploded into colors no human eye could perceive. Her hearing expanded to capture sounds beyond normal range. Her sense of smell sharpened until she could distinguish every person in the room by their unique scent. And beneath it all, a new presence unfolded within her consciousness, wild yet disciplined, ancient yet newborn. The wolf awakened at last. When her vision cleared, Astrid found the council members staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to wariness. Runa and Thyra had stepped back from the dais, their ceremonial opposition temporarily forgotten in shared amazement. Only Leaf remained close, his hand still pressed to her heart, his golden eyes reflecting a triumph he made no effort to conceal. "Rise," he said softly. "Rise, Astrid Wolfborn." She sat up slowly, aware of profound changes within her body. Her muscles felt denser, her senses impossibly sharp. The wolf presence in her mind observed everything with keen interest, absorbing this new reality through shared consciousness. Runa approached, offering the white robe Astrid had discarded. As she accepted it, she noticed her hands, unchanged in appearance yet somehow different, as though the bones beneath the skin had partially reshaped themselves, ready for transformation at her command. "The ritual is complete," Thyra announced, her violet eyes studying Astrid with new respect. "The blood has awakened. The heritage is confirmed." She turned to address the council. "Behold Astrid Wolfborn, recognized daughter of the Raven Mist bloodline, bound to the Blackthorn pack by sacred ritual." The council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement, the gesture carrying formal weight beyond mere courtesy. "Rest now," Runa advised, her storm-gray eyes assessing Astrid's condition with professional detachment. "The awakening is complete, but your body requires time to adjust to its new nature." Astrid nodded, suddenly aware of bone-deep exhaustion beneath the exhilaration of transformation. The wolf consciousness within her agreed, urging rest to consolidate the changes they had undergone. Leaf offered his arm for support as she stepped down from the dais. "I will escort you to your chambers," he said, his tone making it clear this was not a request open to denial, even from his counsel. Thyra's lips thinned slightly at this departure from protocol, but she offered no objection. "The formal acknowledgement ceremony will take place tomorrow at sunset," she said instead, "when you have recovered your strength." "Thank you." Astrid inclined her head, instinctively adopting the formal courtesy that seemed natural to her awakened heritage. They left the sanctum together, Leaf's arm steady beneath her hand. The guards at the door, still in wolf form, lowered their massive heads as she passed, a gesture of respect she understood on a level beyond conscious thought. As they ascended through the fortress levels, Astrid became aware of the blood bond Leaf had described. She could sense his emotions, satisfaction predominant, but underlaid with concern for her well-being and something deeper, more personal, that he kept carefully guarded. "You can feel it," he observed, noticing her increased awareness. "The bond between us." "Yes," she glanced at him as they walked. "It's intimate, more than I expected. It will settle with time, become less intrusive." His golden eyes held hers briefly, though it never disappears entirely. They reached her chambers, transformed now from the austere white of ritual preparation to something more permanent. Rich tapestries hung on the walls, depicting forest scenes and wolf packs running beneath starlit skies. The bed coverings had been replaced with furs and linens in deep forest green, and a fire burned in the hearth against the mountain night's chill. "Your quarters," Leaf explained, seeing her surprise, "for as long as you choose to remain with us." "This was planned before the ritual," she observed. "You were confident I would survive." "I was hopeful." A hint of a smile touched his lips. The signs were promising. He led her to a comfortable chair near the hearth, ensuring she was seated before taking a position across from her. Despite her exhaustion, Astrid felt strangely energized by his presence, the blood bond between them humming with shared vitality. "How do you feel?" he asked, studying her with those penetrating golden eyes. "Different." She considered the changes within her, the heightened senses, the wolf consciousness sharing her mind, the new awareness of her body's potential for transformation. "More than I was, yet still myself. The best outcome of awakening." He nodded approval. "Some lose themselves in the process, become dominated by the wolf aspect rather than achieving balance. And you? How do you maintain that balance after centuries of shifting between forms?" He seemed surprised by the question, as though few had thought to ask it. "Practice, discipline, accepting both aspects as equally valid expressions of self." His expression grew thoughtful. "Many newly awakened make the mistake of seeing the wolf as other, a separate entity to be controlled or feared. In truth, it is simply another facet of your own soul, finally given voice." Astrid nodded, understanding intuitively what he meant. The wolf presence within her didn't feel foreign, merely unfamiliar, like meeting a twin separated at birth, different in experience yet fundamentally the same in essence. "Can I shift?" she asked, the question emerging from that shared curiosity. "Fully, I mean, as your people do." "Our people," he corrected gently. "And yes, I believe you can. Your blood responded more strongly to the ritual than anyone anticipated. The transformation was remarkable." Something like wonder colored his voice. Few with mixed heritage achieve such complete awakening. "When?" "Not tonight." His tone became firm. "Your body needs rest before attempting the physical transformation. Tomorrow, perhaps, after you've recovered your strength." She nodded, accepting his judgment, though part of her, the newly awakened wolf, strained toward the possibility of running on 4 legs beneath the open sky. "Rest now," he said, rising from his chair. "Tomorrow brings new challenges, the acknowledgement ceremony, your first shift, the council's formal recognition of your place among us." "My place," she repeated, the concept still strange after so many years of belonging nowhere. "Yes." His golden eyes held hers, the blood bond between them pulsing with sudden intensity. "If you choose to claim it." The implicit question hung in the air between them. Would she stay? Accept not just her heritage, but the place it offered her in this hidden world of wolves and warriors? "I have nowhere else to go," she said quietly. "The Silverbloods destroyed that option." "That is not a reason to stay," Leaf countered, surprising her with his directness. "Only a reason not to leave. I would not have you remain out of mere necessity." The honesty of his response touched something within her, both the human heart that had survived war and loss, and the wolf spirit newly awakened to pack bonds and shared purpose. "Then I will consider my choice carefully," she promised, "and give you my answer when I know my own mind fully." He nodded, apparently satisfied with this response. "Until tomorrow, then." He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back to her. "One last thing. The blood bond between us. It allows for shared dreams between kindred spirits. Do not be alarmed if your sleep brings visions of forests you've never walked, hunts you've never joined." "I'll remember." She smiled slightly. "Good night, Leaf Blackthorn." "Good night, Astrid Wolfborn." The use of her new name, bestowed by ritual and recognition, carried weight beyond the simple words. When he had gone, Astrid moved to the bed, her body finally succumbing to the exhaustion of transformation. As she settled beneath the furs, the wolf consciousness within her curled contentedly, satisfied with the day's outcomes, if not yet fully acclimated to their shared existence. Sleep came swiftly, pulling her into dreams unlike any she had known before, running through moonlit forests alongside a massive silver-gold wolf, their movements perfectly synchronized, their breath mingling in the cold night air. Whether memory or prophecy, she couldn't tell. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. What mattered was the sensation of belonging, of rightness, that suffused the dream. For the first time since Tormund's death, perhaps for the first time in her life, Astrid felt truly, completely whole. The wolf had awakened, and with it, possibilities she had never dared imagine.